Yeah, like that's gonna happen. And have you opened the waiting room yet? And to anyone online right now, I'll pull a line out of my old career in broadcasting. Please stand by. We will be getting the Housing Stability Council meeting underway in just a couple of minutes. Okay, do we have a quorum of the council online yet?
Let me check here.
Thank you.
Looks like including yourself, 5 members of the council are here. I know Gerard was excused today.
Yes.
And so we would just be waiting on Javier and Sammy Joe.
Okay, but since we do have a quorum, then I would like to move forward with convening the meeting. Good morning, one and all. It is Friday, March 3rd, 2023, and this is the monthly meeting of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. I'm Chair Claire Hall, and could we have a roll call, please, of the council?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFantorum. Councilmember Farrell.
Here.
Chair Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Mena. Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
And for the record, Councilmember Sandoval has been excused today. We do have quorum.
Great, thank you very much. And first up on the agenda, we have public comment. We have 9 people who signed up in advance to offer public comment. And a reminder, we ask that comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes per person. We'll work our way through this list, and then once we've done that, we will open the floor up. If anybody who hadn't signed up in advance wishes to offer public comment, they can do so then. So, is Neil Whitaker online?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right.
Take it away.
Respected members of the council, a LIHTC property monitored by OHCS just got some press. There was an OPB article that came out about the studios, and it is titled "Portland Leaders Celebrated Milepost 5. Now it's a lesson in how not to do affordable housing." I will read a short blip from the article here. In May 2022, Oregon Housing and Community Services Compliance Manager received a report about exposed asbestos in Milepost 5's attic, a space management uses for storage and often broken into by squatters, and forwarded this concern to the Guardian Manager. In response, the Guardian Manager denied that the public had access to the attic and added that she didn't recognize the photos of the exposed asbestos attached to the complaint. That was enough to convince the compliance manager to close the complaint, end quote. I had this original email exchange between OHCS and Guardian, and no effort was made to follow up and verify. And this is the current method for OHCS in dealing with any of the serious issues when they're raised by tenants and neighbors. So when the DEQ was finally alerted to the asbestos by tenants, they did decide that the asbestos was in need of an encapsulation type repair. This incompetence on the part of Guardian and OHCS caused a 6-month delay in the repair. And I suspect if they had their way, there just would have been no repair at all. No real effort is made to look into violations that negatively impact tenant health and safety. If Guardian tells the state regulator, which is you, OHCS, that it has been fixed, whatever Guardian states in an email is just assumed to be true. And this is often despite multiple emails and photos from tenants and neighbors to the contrary. And this is often around serious issues that have resulted in the fentanyl and meth dealing here, the violence, and more strange deaths at the studios. All of the ongoing concerns from tenants and neighbors around the multiple ineligible felons were handled the same way. They ended up on the rent roll. Guardian was caught renting directly to a Sodomy 1 felon. This individual we had warned them about for 6 months prior to them placing him on a lease. They knew about him before they put him on rental paperwork. Renting to ineligible felons occurred on at least 4 other occasions in just 2022, with no consequences for Guardian, but all of the negative effects on the community here. I've said this before, OHCS must facilitate a full, independent, and transparent audit of all criminal background screenings by Guardian's Screeners, Inc. since CDP purchased the studios. And let me be clear, no one is asking for personal names or information on any tenants or criminals. We just want basic accountability on what is happening here so it doesn't happen again. Thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you. Rick Solon?
Charlene,
I'm sorry.
thank you, Chair Hall. Again, to follow up previous testimony and what our neighbor just said, I am a member of the Tenants Council that we've established at Milepost 5, and it basically comes down to communication and accountability. We have been, this tenant council has been formed for several months, and Guardian is not engaging with us on a reasonable basis. They have resident meetings that are unable to be attended by many of the tenants because they're held during the daytime for convenience of staff and not the convenience of the tenants. They have ignored repeated attempts at communication from the council. They, as this OPB article that was previously mentioned has stated, there is a lack of repair going on. There is a continual process of tenant concerns being ignored, and the only people who seem to care about anything is what Guardian and CDP want. It's not their home, it is our home. We live there. It is our, I granted that it's their property, but it's our home. It is our, they should be looking at what is best for us, not as what is best for them. I realize they're in the business to make a profit, but at the same time, they have allowed it to degrade to this degree of problems. Before CDB took over the property, it was a vibrant, bustling part of the community, and it was not this nuisance of a disaster that it has become. And to allow CDP to say, oh, it's fine, just seems so completely counterintuitive that I fail to understand how there's not more accountability involved. All we ask is that CDP puts its money where its mouth is and gets involved and fixes the mess that they allowed to happen.
Okay, thank you. Emily Newton.
Good morning. My name's Emily Newton. I am a homeowner and direct neighbor across from the Milepost 5 studios. And I'm just here today because, you know, the ongoing stuff with this building, you know, it's been over 3 years for me dealing with this. And I just want to point out I'm a neighbor, not a resident, having to deal with this. So I hate to think what it's like to live there and deal with this ongoing stuff with CDP and Guardian. And I'm really at the point of saying, like, demanding that OHCS step in and do an independent audit of this building and this management, because this this ongoing stuff is just, I don't understand why this is going on. The last couple of weeks, we've had felons come back into our neighborhood and access this building with ease. They come in through the doors that are supposed to be secured, through doors that are supposed to be only exit only, and they're entering through these exit only doors with ease, which means squatters and other felons can come into this building. These are felons that I know by name because I've had to make it my business to know by name, because CDP and Guardian have done nothing to evict these felons. People like Chance Durrell Savage and Cedric Mayfield and Angela Ace, who have run drugs and prostitution for the last couple of years. Most recently, a drug window across from my house that I had to endure 4 months after communicating with CDP and Guardian and the police, and nothing was done. I had a Homeland investigator in my driveway watching the drug window. Like, this is not normal at all, right? So, you know, I don't understand why Guardian and CDP are allowing this to happen and not stepping in. I mean, are they profiting from drug and prostitution? Like, at this point, I'm like, what are they benefiting from, having ineligible folks, felons, seasoned criminals living in their building and not doing anything? So I'm just here today on top of the OPB article that came out, on top of all the monthly meetings, the communication that I've written, to say, you know, come on, can we do something about it? Let's, you know, get an independent audit happening. You all are the ones giving the money.
Okay, excuse me, we're at 3 minutes. If you could wrap up your thought, please. Oh, okay. Tom Vincent.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead, please.
Chairperson Bell and respected members of the council, I am also speaking regarding Milepost 5, the building which is owned by Community Development Partners, which I believe is owned by Eric and Kyle Payne. By now, I assume that most of you are aware of and hopefully have read the article that's been referenced before on February 21st, published by Oregon Public Broadcasting, that's titled, "Portland Leaders Celebrated Milepost 5. Now it is a lesson in how not to do public housing." For those of you who have read it, it throws into high relief some of the issues that a coalition of neighbors and tenants have been testifying and writing endless emails and documenting for several years. It's my feeling that OHCS must conduct an open, transparent, and public investigation into events at Milepost 5. For if there's no accountability, there is no reason for it not to happen again. And honestly, on a personal note, I really don't think this is going to go away. I mean, I don't think that it can be ignored that the events that occurred over there need to be looked at, and I imagine there will be further public scrutiny if you don't. Based on the article, as well as direct observation, it would seem that somehow what was a perfectly functional low-income housing and center for the arts was somehow converted into a problematic facility it currently is, at the cost of what appears to be $7 million of taxpayers' money. So what happened? How much in fees were paid to accomplish this? What is the measurable plan to return Milepost to its former status, other than a rock painting class as mentioned in the article? Where are the records of how these funds were spent? Was there any plan at all of what was going to happen in terms of the arts facility there? Or was this entire project just rubber stamped without much information? Was there any documentation of what was supposed to happen? In order for OHCS to continue with its reputation of integrity in providing safe and habitable housing, which they are mandated to do, it seems urgent to conduct a transparent investigation into these matters. Thank you. I cede any further time.
Thanks so much. Craig Patterson.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm a grandfather. I built a geodesic dome for my senior project 52 years ago, and I've been a carpenter, a contractor, housing development specialist for DD Services until Measure 5 came along. And so I have a lot of background in construction. I was also developing some innovative and material and energy efficient housing concepts, but I let it go because to try to get innovation through the code is next to impossible. I would ask you to really take a serious look at what are the major impediments that prevent addressing homelessness that has grown off the charts. I would also ask you to look at our history 90 years ago when we experienced the serious unemployment crisis of the 1930s, and how the CCC camps really brought us out of that depression in many ways. And I think one of the major takeaways of that is that people need housing and jobs, not one or the other. They need both. They need a path to hope. And without that path to hope, then crime obviously ensues. So if we can't focus on creating that path to a sense of hope about one's future, we will never address this issue in any meaningful way, is my sense. And I've tried to be engaged with the building code people, and it's an exercise in futility. It seems to me that in order to really address this in meaningful ways, we need to really open up what's possible and how we can encourage people to work together for their own betterment, as we did when we grew up 60 years ago. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lois Keck.
Good morning. This is
Good morning.
Marty. This is Marty Walker. I'm speaking for Lois Keck this morning. I'm at Wood Spring Apartments in Tigard, Oregon. We are an expired LIHTC building, as you probably know. And we've been recently awarded some funds to help us absorb increasing rent cost. So we were, original budget was 500,000. We are receiving 250 of that 500. We want to know what's happening with the rest of that money. And also why the counselor or assistance that we're getting from Washington County to get people to come in and sign up for those funds. Why are they just now asking us to go door knock to the rest of our neighbors here to find out who has not come in and registered yet? This could have been done a long time ago. to find out which apartments are vacant, which ones would actually qualify for these funds, since there's some restrictions on it. So we're just kind of looking for answers on that. And if by any chance you're going to be trying to seek part of Tina Kotek's budget for that she has earmarked for homeless people, if some of that can also be petitioned to go towards low-income housing for people who are going to be displaced out of the LIHTC program here in the very near future. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you very much. Coy Lay.
I
Coy,
did not find Coy on the list at this time.
okay. Bonnie Robbins.
Good morning. Thank you, council, for the opportunity to offer comments. I'm here to speak about Milepost 5, and I think that I can speak for the rest of us that do come and speak about it, that we really hope for the day that we don't have to. I want to bring two issues forward today. One is about tenant application process. And just to review, I'll read from Guardian's document, criminal conviction criteria. Upon receipt of rental application, owner agent will conduct a search of public records to determine whether an applicant or proposed resident has a conviction for any of the following crimes. And then a list is provided, including any that would adversely affect property or the right of peaceful enjoyment of the premises of residents, landlord, or agent. I mention this because we've asked for an independent investigation of Guardian and CDP for 1.5 years because of evidence of serious neglect. And we also know that neighbors of Milepost 5 have the skills and have been able to search public records and uncover evidence that would disqualify some of the tenants that were accepted. So one wonders about the capabilities of CDP and Guardian to fulfill the responsibilities. And really, one also wonders about your continued confidence in these businesses to fulfill their responsibilities. It is in light of these facts that we expect an independent audit, because I'm afraid the state and these two corporations have failed us repeatedly in the past. Also, I noticed that in a letter dated February 6th to Neil Whitaker that you sound as if you believe CDP and Guardian's statements, even though there has been ample evidence, repeated evidence of their false statements in the past. So this is just a technicality, but it might be better to use phrases such as Guardian reports or Guardian states. For instance, instead of saying Guardian informed us it has decreased response time to tenant-raised issues, you would say Guardian reports that they have decreased response time. And instead of saying CDP and Guardian Cornerstone support and engage with residents, you would say CDP and Guardian state that they engage with residents. This is really simple and a technicality and a little fussy, but it would be a step toward greater trust from the community you serve. We also know that you did an inspection recently, and we know that you didn't get a chance to see some of the squatters and drug sellers because we saw them leave the premises. Some of them just...
Excuse me, we're at the 3-minute time mark, so if you could wrap up your thoughts quickly, please.
Sure. Some of them were just waiting in their cars until you left. So we know that they weren't included in the report. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have Amber Cook online?
Amber Cook is online. There you go. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And you can hear me
Yes,
at this point? Excellent.
yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, good morning, Chair Hall and members of the Housing Stability Council. In Alex Zielinski's OPB article on Milepost 5 from February 21st, she gives it the headline, as people have said, Portland leaders celebrated Milepost 5. Now it's a lesson in how not to do affordable housing. That's a powerful statement and very true. we just continue to just be flummoxed of how a housing authority can be a vehicle that gives developers money to buy low-income housing, but takes no responsibility for the condition of that housing and the way it's being run. Making rich developers richer so they can set up degrading and filthy living places for Oregonian low-income renters is not providing housing. It's depriving us of housing. Perhaps there's a win on paper of more statistical rental units, but when the lives being lived in those units are being downgraded and even ruined by the slum conditions and unbridled crime, you have truly a loss for everyone but the developers. And the state and everyone who actually lives in Oregon, will pay the outsourced costs the developers are saving on repairs and maintenance in spike high increased social services, trying to save the lives of people living at Milepost 5 and other places like it from the fall that people take into depression and suicide, addiction and homelessness, who have, with the way rents are structured, little choice but to live in a horror film semi-suitable of affordable housing that for some reason OHCS keeps allowing these proven slumlords to run it as they see fit. It's not right to give developers corporate socialism money to run nuisance property housing. It's not right to enrich developers at our expense. No money should be given to anyone to do housing without firm and transparent oversight. Without strict enforcement of landlord-tenant law, building codes, fire safety, and habitability. That doesn't mean giving landlords, 2 or 3 weeks to prepare for an inspection. That means coming around multiple times a year unannounced and actually checking on things. We need a housing office that enforces decent and truly affordable housing and then actually penalizes landlords, revokes their tax credits, when they don't provide it to their renters. And we have to say it's absolutely beyond past time for OHCS to insist that CDP pay for an independent audit of all of Guardian's background screenings at Milepost 5 since Guardian took over, with published transparent results. Yes, CDP and Guardian will protest that private information cannot be made public. But the results of an audit, of course, don't need to have names published. Just the
Excuse
results.
me, we're at 3 minutes, so if you could wrap up your thought.
I will
please.
thank you. Of whether the background checks were actually run, and if so, how many other ineligible tenants have been rented to. So if OHCS won't take responsibility for these violations by the companies they forced on us in 2018 and continue to ignore us, we'll have no other choice but to escalate the issue. We can't keep living in this kind of danger from lack of sanitation and rampant crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Amber Cook.
Amber already went, Chair.
Oh,
Hall.
I'm sorry. Didn't get enough check marks. Okay, that concludes the list of people who had signed up in advance. So I want to open up right now an opportunity. Anybody who would like to speak to the commission for up to 3 minutes during public comment, now's your opportunity.
Please use the raise hand function. If you're on the phone, *9 is your raise hand function.
Okay, I see we do have a couple of folks. Who's first?
Tina King.
Okay, Tina King, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Tina King, and I called last month over a grant fraud. Since then, I have had no acknowledgement and no responses of any kind to my complaints. If I have spoken upon deaf ears, please let me know. I will further my complaints.
Okay, is that all, or I'm sorry?
Yes, that's all.
Okay, thank you. And another person? Who else do we have?
Robin Zimmerman.
Hi, I'm Robin Zimmerman. I'm on the interim board of the Pioneer Park Residents Community Cooperative we're developing. I know I've sent you all a letter, so I'll keep this short. We just wanted to thank you for the grant opportunity that makes it possible for this community to become a cooperative. We're 104 homes, which is 104 families, which will now become stable and protected from investor corporations from buying up manufactured home and turning it into a profit source and keeping this as just a local community that we have. Many of these families are close to retirement or retired and on a fixed income. A lot of the families are of a lower income wage. And so this is the only way they'd be affordable to have a home they could purchase and have a home ownership inside a community of our own. And I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to make this possible so that we were able to go through and complete this project. We just finished voting unanimously to make this purchase happen. And thank you.
Congratulations and thank you. All right, that brings us to the close of our scheduled public comment time. Now it's on to the report of the chair. I'm going to bring two things before you, just briefly to note that I had the opportunity yesterday afternoon to join several other elected officials from all corners of Oregon in offering testimony to the Ways and Means Subcommittee that is currently considering the OHCS budget bill. And I know that Director Bell was, I think, in the room at the table for 4 straight days of hearings on the budget. So I'm sure she can fill us in on more detail. And the second item I want to share is a very bittersweet one. Barb Higginbotham, council member, will be retiring at the end of the month and also leaving our council. And this is the very nice plaque we're going to be presenting to her. And, you know, I always tell people that of all the boards, committees, commissions, councils I've served on in my time in public service, that this council is bar none the best group. And one of the reasons I think is our diversity in all senses of that word. And certainly Barb has brought the perspective that, yeah, the folks at the eastern end of the state are Oregonians as well. You know, there's been a couple of times when she and I have scheduled Zoom calls together, and she's had to gently remind me that, you know, she's in another time zone, that the eastern strip of the state is in the mountain time zone. And I think, you know, that's important perspective on just how large and diverse our state is. And Barb has been a voice for Eastern Oregon, I think, with smarts, kindness, good humor, directness. And we're happy, well, I'll say I'm happy that you're getting to move on to the next phase, but Barb, you're going to be missed as well. And I'd like to invite other council members, if they'd like to offer their perspectives and farewells to Barb. I'll open the floor for you now.
If I may?
Yes.
Hi, thank you, Chair Hall. Barb, wow, this caught me off guard. Well, I mean, good for you. Glad you're going to get to move on to another phase of your life. I have personally enjoyed getting to know you, and especially understanding a perspective that I wasn't real familiar with from the action agencies. So thank you. I wish we had more time to work together. Maybe our paths will cross again. I hope so.
You're on mute, Chair Hall.
Okay, now who else has their hands up? I think Mary Lee.
Councilmember Mena, I think, was before me.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah, now I see. For some reason, the hand was in an odd color. Anyway, Councilmember Mena, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chair Hall. Barb, unfortunately, we were never able to meet in person, but I definitely appreciated your perspective and the importance of having somebody that is in such areas of the state that we really don't know much, or at least from my perspective, and get educated. It is important, and I really hope that I'm sure you will stay involved, and I hope that in the future I'll get to meet you in person. I want to say thank you for your service. It's great to have served with you.
Okay, now Council Member Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Well, Barb, in some ways, I think you and I probably have the longest tenured relationship here. We both started at the council, I think in the same sort of class of folks that started. And before that, through the community action agencies and network. I want to just acknowledge how much I have learned from you about showing up in a really fierce way, and also really willing to like work. And I think like to work to find commonality. And I think that's not only a hallmark of you, I think it's a hallmark of our community action agencies. And I think it's a hallmark of all of our neighbors who are living outside of the metro areas, right? Where we don't have the luxury of being mad at each other or saying we disagree and we can't find agreement in these places. And, you know, you and I have had disagreements about what to do and how to approach. And I have never, ever once doubted your heart, your sincerity, and your interest in trying to find the best path forward for the common good. And I will certainly take that away with me into these future conversations. I hope the Community Action Agency Network knows just how hard you have worked to represent them well, represent a perspective that is often missing in the discussion. And I just think the world of you, Barb. I am going to continue to look towards you for an example of how to enter the loftiest state of retirement. It is a condition and an estate that I personally aspire to one day achieving, and I know you're going to show me how it's done. So just so much love, so much appreciation, and go out and have a fantastic time. You have earned it.
Thanks. And Councilmember Rogers?
Hi, I was totally caught off guard and not realizing that this is your last meeting, but wanted to take the time to say, although we haven't met officially in person, Zoom, you know, that's a new thing. So it's like you meet people on Zoom and that's how it is. But in my short tenure, I have come to respect your opinion, and also it has broadened my opinion to think about people outside the immediate Portland metro area. And it's just an example of how diversity is important on the council so that everyone is represented and different perspectives are brought to the table. So thank you for your service. I hope one day that I too can retire and receive one of these really cool looking plaques. So enjoy the rest of your journey.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, the first time I saw this wonderful plaque design, I said, hey, I may have to leave the council just so I can get one of these great plaques. But now let's see who else. I believe Council Member Farrell. You're up.
Well, I also was caught off guard, but both envious and happy for you to have this joyous occasion in your life. And it's just another counselor who is outside of the Portland-Salem metro area. I just have really appreciated not only your perspective, but your willingness to speak up and hold strong to your point of view. So I echo what everyone else has said and only wish you the best.
All right, well, Barb, any parting words of wisdom for us?
Oh, probably no parting words of wisdom, but just thank you everybody for the support and the kind words. Very much looking forward to retirement, but I have to tell you, this is a tough group to leave. I really have enjoyed my time on the council and I've learned so much. I mean, it has been a wild ride over the last, I don't know, 4 years or so. We've had to address some really tough issues, and you know, I've had to open my mind and broaden my perspective, and I just appreciate each and every one of you for helping me along the way and allowing me to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And lest anybody read anything wrong into it, but Barb, you and I will always have Boston. We attended with some other members of the council and agency staff a housing conference in Boston a few years ago, and I'm tattling on myself and on Barb, but hey, she's retiring. We were very good in attending all the conference sessions, save one. We did sneak away for an hour because we were just a couple of blocks from Fenway Park, and as fellow baseball fans, we wanted to take the guided tour of Fenway. So thanks
You
so
had to
much.
do it. We had to do it.
Yeah, when it's just a couple of blocks away, how can you pass that up?
That's right.
All right, we're going to move on to the director's report, and Director Andrea Bell.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, good morning, Chair Hall, members of the council. It's boy, these Fridays, first Fridays of the month keep rolling around quicker and quicker. Maybe it is just me, but as always, it is always so good and always feels like such a gift to be in community with you, and always appreciate all of the public comment and participation in that. Barb, I am going to totally put you on the spot and ask if you could turn your video back. You knew what was happening. I saw you attempt to try to turn the video off. I'm going to ask you to turn it back on. So there's so much that I could say, Barb. We have been rolling for 4 years since I have been across the agency. And I think our working relationship has generated so much insightful conversation and so much opportunity for shared values, Barb, in that. I think it was said by some of our colleagues here, but certainly worth lifting up. You should feel proud, your team should feel proud, the community action agencies across the state should feel incredibly proud, not only for how you've represented them and their perspectives and their work of service, but also Eastern Oregon and the people of Eastern Oregon and the level of love and commitment that you have was nothing short of consistent and just a steadfast leadership. And one of the things amongst many of them that I have grown to just acquire so much appreciation for you for is your willingness to take in information and make new decisions and be wrong about something, Barb. I have always appreciated your willingness to come out and be very clear about where you stand about something, and then the ability to take in information and say, I'm changing my mind, which I feel like is sometimes an undervalued privilege that we have, which is to change our minds sometimes when we take in new information, which we need to continue to do. As a council, we have to do that. And I will also never forget being in Eastern Oregon and you driving us around after that very heavy meal to all of the things that we needed to see. And so I will always always hold that. And so just so much appreciation for you. And just to be clear for the council, the paper is not the plaque. Obviously, virtually, that's what we pop up. There will be an actual plaque, Chair Hall. I don't know if you're being facetious or not. It is a good plaque, and there's an actual real plaque. We're not going to leave you with a virtual plaque to screen share. So we don't roll tacky around here. So we'll make sure to get you a real plaque on that. So let me just dive right into it and pivot here as we all sort of ride high on the appreciation for Councilmember Higginbotham. So I have a few updates at the top, and then I will pivot to Nicole Sting. Ms. Sting will give us some updates, some synthesized updates on all things unfolding across the legislature and also within the governor's recommended budget and key things to know on the bill, on a number of bills. Maybe just briefly to start with my update. So we have previously shared with the council that we, as part of our commitment across the agency, as part of our commitment, as part of our responsibility around advancing racial justice and being in a place to continue to center equity and racial justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have engaged in a long-term, what I believe will be a long-term journey and pathway with the Center for Equity and Inclusion. We engaged in phase 1 of that work, which we talked a little bit with the council about. Because of the leadership really of Ms. Bunch, Chelsea Bunch, we are entering into the next phase of that work. And so the next phase of that work will be to continuing to focus on agency leadership and our why as an agency. agency. Our why in terms of a commitment to racial justice, continuing to have adaptive learning and building along that really focused racial affinity across the agency, but also making sure that we, as we expand these learnings together across the agency, really part of that work is to really build, is going to have an intentional focus to build capacity within our HR department and leaders with a racial justice lens. We find that that is critically important, not only for the work that we do in service to the people of Oregon, but quite frankly, as an employer, we also need to show up for the people across this agency. And we also need to make sure that our HR recruitment strategies, the way that we engage and support and retain, continues to carry that lens. And so I want to just make sure for the council's awareness that we are entering into that next phase with an expanded focus on HR practices, policies, and bringing that into light. So I want to make sure that the council has awareness of that. Earlier this week, we engaged in a conversation with Janice Bowler. So Janice Bowler is the U.S. Department of Treasury's first counselor for racial equity. This was, to me, I found this position and this work to be really interesting at the Treasury level, to be thinking about really the scope of Treasury from their role at the federal level and that intersectionality of racial equity and really bringing that into the fold. And so while the premise of the conversation was focused on sort of establishing and scaling special purpose credit programs, creating and preserving housing wealth, particularly within Black and Brown neighborhoods, building credit, assets, opportunity for renters with low incomes. And I think another area, as well as part of the conversation, while not new, is also empowering developers of color too, which is not something that we always bring into the conversation. One of the important facets of the conversation that left me energized, and I think it's a good preface for actually the first topic that we'll dive in today, is really centering racial justice in government agencies. From a statewide housing plan perspective, we've talked earlier previously about progress that we've been able to make, shared progress. But also from a racial justice perspective, holding that commitment, we want that progress to be an enduring framework that is beyond my tenure, that will continue to endure beyond the comings and goings of council leadership and folks across the agency. And so really enlightening to hear how Treasury is approaching this, and all the more reason that we have to be doubled down in this as a government agency to be able to really advance that in meaningful ways. And so I bring that into just collective consciousness, because when we think about our work from a racialized perspective, whether we're talking about production, preservation, pathways to home ownership, disaster recovery, addressing homelessness, it is going to require us to be very clear and centered and aligned in our decisions and around intent and impact in that. And so I want to just make sure that you all have a little bit of texture from those conversations. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Ms. Sting, I want to just also share a little bit about very quickly House Bill 5019. So as the council is probably well aware, Governor Kotek, in alignment with her priorities, which very much intersect with the priorities of this agency, have declared 3 executive orders, to which one of them declares a state of emergency on homelessness for certain continuums of care regions of the state. I want to make sure that this council has some detail as to what is included from a financial perspective within House Bill 5019 and what it aspires to do, so that as we bring items to council, that you all have sort of the backdrop of what's coming and how that aligns and intersect with this agency, and also intersects with a lot of the work that we have been engaged in terms of addressing homelessness, and also making sure that in that work that we are not sacrificing speed and expediency for galvanizing with our state and local partners and centering racial justice, and also making sure that we are honoring at all moments the sovereignty of Oregon's tribes as well. So I'll quickly run through this, and Nicole will keep me honest and tell me what I've missed. So within that House Bill 5019, there's about $85 million that are focused on rehousing people experiencing homelessness and expanding shelter capacity specifically for those designated areas within the emergency areas. The goal within that is to rehouse 1,200 households and to expand shelter capacity by 600 within those EO region. There's about $33 million to prevent homelessness, which is a statewide goal. There is $27 million proposed to rehouse people experiencing homelessness and to expand shelter capacity specifically in rural counties within the balance of state. And within that, there is a goal to rehouse 450 households experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and then to expand shelter capacity by 100. So I went through that piece very quickly. So there's $27 million proposed specifically for rural counties within the balance of state. The goal is to rehouse 450 households and to increase shelter capacity by 100. And then within the totality of what's in House Bill 5019, it also includes a direct allocation of $5 million to the federally recognized tribes across the state. And then there's about $3.9 million to support the emergency management in OHCS functions to support that work. And then lastly, there's $200,000 to propose long-term rental assistance. I'll follow up with the council just so that you have that in writing, but I wanted to make sure as Ms. Sting is going through the unfoldings of the legislative process that you have that detail. So I'll yield back for a moment, and then Ms. Sting, I'll pass it to you to fill in perhaps the details that I'm sure I missed.
Right, Director Bell, I'm not seeing anyone jump in with questions, so I'll go ahead and jump in. For the record, Nicole Sting, OHCS's Assistant Director of Government Relations. It's good to be with you all this morning. I might take a half step back before diving into the rest of those details. And to Council Member Higginbotham, wish you a happy send-off and a happy retirement. I appreciate your service not only to Eastern Oregonian and the community you serve there, but also to the council. You often ask the hard question, the right question, and just want you to know as a staff how appreciated that is and how much it helps the agency grow. So do want to acknowledge and give you a quick send off before diving in. And Director Bell, to pick up where you left off, I'm going to put in the chat the Legislative Fiscal Office's summary of House Bill 50. I said 2019 as I'm seeing in the chat, but it's 5019. The -3 amendments represent the totality of the policy bill that encompasses the early session package. I will highlight a few other investments that were not included in Director Bell's quick summary. First and foremost, that is $33.6 million in eviction prevention resources that kind of pluses up resources through the ORDAP program that community action agencies are administering, as well as providing resources to the Eviction Prevention Rapid Response Program that has been a successful program and quickly intervening at the last step before an eviction and keeping Oregonians housed. That program ran out of funding earlier this year, so we're glad to see that investment provided for this upcoming biennium. There's also investments in the bill to support the emergency housing account, specifically for youth experiencing homelessness. There's investments in a few other things throughout the Department of Human Services to support youth homelessness. I won't go into those weeds and those details, but would recommend that you take some time reviewing and getting familiar with the work that will be coming before you. I'll also flag, you'll see reductions in funds for OHCS current programs. Those are programs that were undersubscribed. So that includes the Landlord Compensation Fund and a few other programs where we're shifting resources around to dedicate resources this biennium to the governor's emergency response. So that's all included in that summary from Legislative Fiscal Office. It's a longer document, but the first 4 pages detailed section by section what's happening in that bill. We'll also see the other part of that package, House Bill 2001, move out of the Budget Committee, the Transportation and Economic Development Committee, next Tuesday. They'll be heard together and moved together. House Bill 2001 includes many components. It is a over 130-page bill, and I will put in the chat a link to the staff measure summary that's created by the Nonpartisan Legislative Policy and Research Office that details the -11 amendment that was incorporated into House Bill 2001. It includes a number of items. Very importantly, for those of you that are tracking the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, that bill has been encompassed as part of the early session package. There's also kind of policy changes for both OHCS and ODHS and how we respond to youth homelessness, as well as resources for modular housing facilities and economic development associated with that will come through Oregon Housing and Community Services, as well as a myriad of other policy changes related to housing, including resources for free development of middle income or moderate income housing that will be delivered through the Oregon Facilities Office that is administered by the Oregon State Treasury. So there's a lot in there. It's a meaty package. I won't spend time kind of detailing each component of it, but happy to just kind of give that high level overview. And as I'm looking through the summary to make sure I didn't forget anything, I of course did. There's resources for the Department of Agriculture to help our growers and farmers adapt existing housing to upcoming OSHA regulations on what's required of farm worker housing. So there's resources to support that industry and adapting to those new requirements, as well as changes to landlord-tenant law, particularly around eviction proceedings, giving tenants more time, increasing notice periods, and provide some requirements for rental assistance providers to notice landlords when a tenant has received assistance or when a tenant's application for rental assistance has been denied. It also requires that tenants receive dated notice of emergency rental assistance applications from any provider utilizing public funds. So again, that bill does a lot. When it's formally passed, we'll have more summary materials to help make that 100+ pages digestible. But we're really excited to see legislative leadership take to action the governor's call and move an early session package. I think historic is often an overused word these days, but it is a historic feat to see the legislature move this quickly on housing and to make housing this much of a priority. So both legislative leadership and Governor Kotek have committed to having a signed bill by March 17th. We are racing to that date, and we'll be able to report back the final outcomes of that early session package when we talk with you all in April. I'm noting we're short on time, so I'll just highlight a few other key things moving in the legislature. As Chair Hall mentioned, we spent this week doing what we call Budget Week, and I put in the chat a summary document of the agency's request budget. I sent out at the top of last month a comparison between the agency request budget and the governor's request budget. This document is just a quick reference document for everything that is encompassing the governor's $1.46 billion budget for OHCS. So it's a helpful summary to kind of look program by program, what are we investing in? Director Bell and Deputy Director Yant were before the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Transportation and Economic Development for a marathon 4-day hearing. We did the math there. We were going through about $1 billion an hour in our presentation. So it was certainly quite a bit of content to get through, and we're glad to have our leadership help tramp through that with the committee. We had a lot of thoughtful questions from committee members and a lot of interest in issues ranging from housing supply to shelter and much more. So we'll have additional information kind of coming out as we put together our response materials to the committee, and happy to share that with this council as well. I'll maybe flag just a few more things and give a thank you to Chair Hall for joining the public testimony. We saw 27 Oregonians from across the state representing different interests, local governments, community organizations, those that have received OHCS services, share their support for the investments in the governor's recommended budget. This included private industry partners, public partners, nonprofits, and really a good array of coalition-based organizations detailing to legislators the need for housing investments. I will note the public record, especially for those of you listening in, the public record on OHCS's budget is open until 1 p.m. tomorrow. We'll have a full accounting of the testimony submitted at that time, but as of yesterday afternoon, it was a pretty overwhelming amount, and we're grateful to our partners for helping elevate that need and providing that support of the governor's recommended budget. There's, of course, more happening in the legislature. We are at time, and what I'll do is put in the chat one more document, and I hope I'm not overwhelming you here. OHCS hosts a bi-weekly call with legislative advocates, lobbyists, to provide information sharing on what's moving in the legislature and help coordinate efforts. I put the slide deck we use for that call in the chat that details what's happened in the last 2 weeks and what's coming up in the next 2 weeks. So hopefully it's a helpful reference document, but if you do have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Anything from council members? All right, well, thank you very
Chair Hall,
much.
if I may just add
Of course.
one very quick thing, and then we can dive right into the agenda. Obviously, we have a there's an audacious proposal through the governor's recommended budget that we are hoping comes through. We know we're at a moment of criticality and we need to push like we haven't before. We need to push and continue to push. And so the legislature will have some really important decisions in front of them. I would just flag, we would love to be able to spend some time at a future meeting, if the council will have it, to get in front of the council as to what preparedness from an agency perspective looks like. So really getting into, like, from an operational perspective, what does that mean for preparedness? So I will just put that out there, and if the council is amenable to having that, we can work to have that conversation in front of you.
Hey, Councilmember Lee.
Chair Hall, thank you, Director Bell. I was going to say something very similar. We talked about this last time when we started to understand what this package might look like. And I actually have to say, I think we have to have a special meeting. I think we have to have a special meeting. I think we have to have enough time. We want this funding and these opportunities to come, and they can't break the individual staff people that we have working in the agency. And I'm not sure, again, I'm one step removed, that folks could take on much more than they have been lifting for the last 2 to 3 years. So I think that's a responsibility of this council to understand that to the degree that's appropriate, and we can see it. And then also to work as thought partners with Director Bell and the rest of her team to be able to articulate what it's going to take outside of the governor's budget being adopted and passed in order to make the governor's vision actually be real in the world. And those two things are different, right? And the organization, I appreciate the, what do we need to do to get prepared? And also a conversation about, sort of some failure mode discussion. And what are we going to do if this happens or that happens as a part of that preparedness? And then just some simple acknowledgement of how much we are continuing to ask our staff to do on top of. And I know this is shared by my colleagues. That's not responsible for us as a council anymore, to just assume that the staff are going to do more and more and more. It's not humanly possible in the real world without some real consequences happening. And so I would like to say I fully support Director Bell, your request to us. And I believe that has to be, if not a full day session separate from a meeting, close to a full day session separate from the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Councilmember Lee? Anyone else at this point? All right, then, I believe we are ready to move on to our next agenda item, an exciting one. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I believe we turn things over now to Director Chelsea Bunch.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Really great to be with you. Before I get started, I'm going to try this share screen out here real quick. Let me get situated here. Can you all see the screen? Everything looks good. Okay. Now I just need to make you all a little bit bigger because I don't like giving presentations and not being able to see you. So just bear with me really quick here. Awesome. Okay, very good. Well, good morning, Chair Hall, council members, and Director Bell. It's really great to be with each of you today. For the record, my name is Chelsea Bunch. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. Super excited to be here with my friend and colleague, Megan Bolton, Assistant Director of Research. And we're really excited to brief you on the agency's Racial Equity Analysis Tool, also referred to from here on out as the REAT. So I won't say the long name anymore, but we will refer to it as the REAT from here on out. Just a little bit of context. We've been working on development of this tool for a little over a year now, and are at a critical, what I would say a critical juncture, and really thinking about how we move into implementation, full agency implementation of this tool. And really think it's a great time to share a little bit about where we've been with you all and what we're currently doing and what our hopes are and what we hope to achieve with the use of this tool. So I want to first refer you to the memo in your packet. It is dated for February. If you remember, we were going to bring this to you all in February and we had a packed agenda. And so we're excited to be able to come back today. But the memo is great because it sets a bit of context for where we've been thus far and how the tool, which was also included in the council packet, really came to be. Our presentation today is really going to focus on how we intend to prepare for long-term agency-wide implementation of the tool. But I also want to note, that there's nothing wrong with doing right now, right? And so I want to just share with you all that, again, what we're sharing is our plans around long-term implementation and how we're preparing to resource for that. And I think in addition to that, this is when I think about long-range implementation, what we're really talking about is how we embed the use of the REAT into our daily business operations of our agency to help us meet our business needs. And obviously, certainly to ensure that we are having solid outcomes for communities across the state. And I think I just am reflecting, I noted this ahead of our planned presentation last month, but reflecting on a bit of feedback that I believe we heard from the council at our February meeting and some other discussion, particularly from Councilmember Lee and Councilmember Sandoval, that we know there's always an opportunity, there's always time to ask intentional questions in our work. And I think that this is going to be really important, particularly as we prepare for a huge influx of investments that are coming our way in the coming months. And so I want you all to know that while what we're sharing with you today is really focused on long-range implementation planning, we are also absolutely in full support of staff continuing to utilize the tool in its current form right now. And staff are doing that. So this is a bit of a parallel process. So I just wanted to make that note. Okay, now let me make sure I'm getting my screen here together. Okay, here we go. So Megan and I have had an opportunity to kind of share a bit about the REAT in various forms, and I always think it's really important to just start here. And I just want to elevate Dr. Zapata, who shared some feedback with us during the February 2022 Racial Justice Council meeting, where we shared an early, like super early draft of this tool. And she noted that if any agency does not know how racial equity considerations have actually shown up in your final decision, then you're not doing equity. And so the reason why focusing on long-term implementation of this tool is so critically important is because we don't want this to be, I learned a new word from our friends at the Center for Equity and Inclusion. We don't want this to be chequity, which means we don't want this to be check the box equity. So I absolutely wrote that word down and have incorporated that into my vocabulary. So we don't want chequity. We want this to be an intentional time process for people to be thoughtful about the decisions that they're making, including where they are seeing unintended impacts or intended impacts, and how what they learn is actually going to cause different decision-making that gets us to true outcomes. So I think this is good for us to remind ourselves collectively that as public servants, that we have a responsibility to proactively reduce racial disparities and barriers as we develop programs and policies and budgets. We have a frame from our state DEI action plan, which we're happy to share. This came from the Department of Administrative Services in partnership with the previous governor's office. And it's a really great scaffold for all state agencies. And so this is our opportunity to kind of continue to dig even a little bit deeper. I think we also have a responsibility to be very clear about how we are measuring success and becoming more equitable, and how the shifts in our thinking really are leading towards reducing barriers and disparate outcomes. And so this is really about when you know better, you do better. And so we need to create as much opportunity as possible for us to know better and do better. And then I think, racial equity certainly, analysis certainly helps us operationalize our equity and racial justice values. It's really how we walk our talk. And I think in this last year, we've all been kind of given a bit of a gut check. We're in a moment of time where we have to be really thoughtful about how we both live our values and our intentions, but also consider our capacity. And so I really appreciate the early conversation around capacity. And that's certainly something that Megan and I, as we co-lead this project, the implementation of the REIT, we are giving very focused time and energy to, again, particularly knowing that we have some major investments coming our way. So we're thinking about how we balance quantity and quality. We're thinking about how we live our values, knowing that we may not always do it perfectly, but what are the minimum kind of viable components that really allow us to live out our values? And we're thinking about constant iteration and being mindful of capacity. And we also really want to avoid what we call the DAD, decide, announce, and defend. And so we want to make sure that we don't undermine our processes and our intentions. And so we must be really planful and we must ensure that everybody is using this tool. And so we have to think about all the systems that need to shift or stay the same or be edited a bit. And we also are thinking very closely about accountability and what that looks like in this process. So I won't go, you'll see a couple of things here, racial equity impact statement and the racial equity statement for permanent rule filings. I won't focus too much on those. I'm happy to have some offline conversations about what those are, but I think generally as an agency, we really are thinking about our racial equity analysis kind of as an arc of analysis in the agency. And that begins certainly at the agency request budget. We had the opportunity, I think this is probably several months ago, as we were preparing to build our budget. The Racial Justice Council, in partnership with Department of Administrative Services, is really asking all state agencies across the enterprise to complete racial equity impact statements as they're building out their budgets. We believe that that is kind of step one in this arc. Again, we'll spend some time on the REIT, so I won't dive too deeply into that. But on the back end, I know you all have had the opportunity to hear from JC Ladwig, who's come and who works on our rules. She's wonderful and also began to share with us what it means to center racial equity when it comes to permanent rule filings, which is right before we get into program implementation. And so we believe that kind of rounds out this arc of racial equity analysis. And so those spaces are separate, those items are separate, but we believe that they're connected. And I think we think of this as an arc because we really want to ensure that our work is coordinated and and aligned internally. But it also raises some questions about how we do this in real time, knowing that all of these places are really critical for how we live our values and put resources out in community. So again, a part of our thinking as we move into implementation of the REIT is thinking through things like what actually does get analyzed. How do we prioritize what gets analyzed? Because we're not able to do all of the things right now, but we are able to prioritize. And so how do we do that? How do we hold ourselves accountable to doing the analysis itself and incorporating what we've learned into the program policy and budget build? And then I think really importantly right now is how do we actually resource this work beyond just our stated desire to do so? So these are questions that I think all of us internally have been wrestling with. And we've got some focused space over the coming months to really dig into this. And we'll get into that in just a bit. So I think it's always good to just name, why the heck do we have a REIT? And so, racial equity analysis tools really are designed to integrate explicit consideration of racial equity in our decision making. But it's not just about examining, but it's also about action. And so I think it's also the opportunities for us as an agency, as we're building out programs and policies and we're asking for money to move work forward, that we actually look at where disparity is, and that we look at it certainly in context of race and ethnicity, but also at the intersection of identity, because often at that intersection of identity, we see even deeper disparity. And so we believe that this tool gives us the opportunity to dig as deep as we possibly can. And I think just kind of future state, right? I think that beyond looking at unintended consequences, we also see the REIT really as a prime opportunity to help us in our development of the next statewide housing plan. So I think as a core team, we're beginning to think about that and beginning to think about how we resource this in a way that supports the building out of that plan. Because we do believe that it can be used to develop and set strategies as well as determine metrics and outcomes that can be embedded throughout the plan, not just as a singular priority within the plan. And I think that's the next evolution for me, certainly, as we think about the build out of that plan. Which really just, I think, won't continue to meet us where we are right now in this moment, which is a very different place than where we were 5 years ago when we created the first iteration of the plan. And I think in doing so really ensures that that this really truly is embedded in the whole of our agency work, and that we're centering across all priorities. And then I think, lastly, I think it can help provide a roadmap to ensure our planning and operations and investments actually get us to the outcomes that we're hoping to see. So I think it's important to note that. I just want to share a little bit. Again, you all have the tool within the packet, but I wanted to just do a super high level overview of the organization and format of the tool. It's really cool. I just want to elevate. We had a set of staff from across the agency, from various program places and program across the agency who really worked hard to put this draft tool together. And it included a incredible, I call it a labor of love, amount of work, of research, gathering, learning, listening together to come up with what you all see today. So the tool itself is structured with introductions, and I think it's really important that we call out the purpose of the tool early on. We talk a bit about kind of the larger picture and really what it means to focus on root causes. We talk a bit about targeted universalism, which I think is a really, really important frame for the work that we do, right? Because if we can get it right for communities who are experiencing the deepest disparity, we're going to get it right for everyone, and everyone can benefit from that. And so it's really important to keep that frame that we have to have targeted strategies in order to really turn the tide in disparity. There's a huge focus on community engagement and access in a way that I think is pushing us to be more transformational and less transactional in how we engage with communities in a meaningful way. Lots of data. There's plenty of opportunities to bring in data to help support what we're trying to do. Conversations around benefits and burdens and unintended consequences and outcomes, and investment and accountability are kind of the key large pieces of this tool. There's also a really robust appendix that has a great cadre of definitions. It talks about both positive and problematic practices of data analysis. So there's some discussion in there around research justice and data justice. Has resources for staff, guides, community engagement guides, and then reports on communities of color in Oregon. And so we believe that this, certainly we want to provide support for staff as they're utilizing this tool. And we'll talk a little bit about what we believe that may look like. But we certainly encourage you all to dig into each of the sections, and we'll have some time for questions and curiosities a little bit later on here. So just super high level, just kind of like where we've been, again, referring you to your memo for context for how we got here. But I think at a high level, we have literally been moving towards implementing the use of this tool, which is where we are currently at. And this has included organizing around the tool development itself, drafting the tool, piloting the tool internally. And so we've had folks from across the agency already begin to use the tool, which has been great for them as they work through program build or program changes. But it's also been great, I think, for the ad hoc work group and certainly for the core implementation team, because it helps us constantly improve and iterate the tool. It feels like the tool may always be in draft form, some version of a draft form, because we want, as time progresses, we know that our language shifts, what we learn shifts, and so we want the tool to shift as well in that way. But we are now in a place where we really need to focus our efforts on long-term implementation. And so I think that it's important, again, to note that while we're focusing on primarily long-term implementation, we are still encouraging staff to use the tool as it's currently developed, as they identify opportunities to do so. And I think staff have been eager to do so. I think as we prepare to focus on implementation, we've really honed in on some key considerations that I think I just want to elevate, and we'll get into this in just a second here. We are really holding and thinking about internal coordination and consistency of use across the agency. We're thinking about and preparing for setting our own expectations and holding ourselves accountable to them. And I think this is important because the development of this tool is not something that has been mandated to us. This is actually something that staff have been asking for quite some time. I joined the agency at the end of 2017 as we were kind of coming in, and we were like fast in the middle of statewide housing plan implementation. And even during that time, staff were asking, it'd be great to have a tool, right? And so this is really coming to fruition from requests and desires of staff over time. And so we are setting our own expectations. We are really focusing on not giving into oftentimes what feels like a sense of urgency, because this is, again, about long-range implementation. And so we're also thinking through determining the appropriate levels of engagement in various places across the agency, but also externally, how we need to engage with folks, thinking through resourcing these efforts and supporting our staff to do so. And then I think part of what you're going to begin to hear is that, we've heard feedback from staff that working with our project management office that was recently stood up would be integral to ensuring that we can build a sustainable plan, that we can identify the resources that are needed, and that we can really hold ourselves accountable for implementation. This is actually, in February, early February, we were officially approved. We are an agency strategic project, which means that we have full support from our project management office that is supporting us to develop the implementation plan and really keep us on track. So we have support in that way. Let me see here. Just really quick before I turn it over to my colleague, Megan. this slide is important, and I think this slide really encompasses exactly where we're at right now in this moment. So, I think I'll say, make no mistake, we are absolutely going to implement the REIT, but we're going to do so in a way that becomes a part of our agency culture and a part of our regular business practice. And I think in order to do that, we really are taking the time that we need to be intentional and thoughtful. So thinking again about accountability mechanisms, beyond the stated commitment, what are the people and the system resources needed to ensure that we can actually operationalize the tool? And then I think this is probably one of the most important things. How are we making sure that we're actually doing something different or the same if it's working, based on what we're learning from use of the tool itself? And so this is all of what we are focused on as we are building out. And I think we've finally decided, we've landed on our core team of staff to be resourced to move into plan implementation. So we are going to spend a little bit of time digging into our plans around implementation. So I want to kick it over to Megan Bolton, Assistant Director of Research, to talk a little bit more about implementation planning for the REIT in particular. And Megan, I'll totally move your slides forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chelsea. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, members of the council. For the record, my name is Megan Bolton. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of Research for OHCS. And just want to sort of start off by saying how what a joy it has been to work on this project with Chelsea. And to have the support of our entire executive team on this project, that has been really critical to us being able to sort of make the progress that we've been able to make. I also just want to talk a little bit about the lessons learned from sort of the early iterations of this work and how it has influenced the way we've really started to approach the long-term implementation plan. I think, as Chelsea mentioned, this product, we're all really just like kind of inspired by the product itself and the work that went into it by the ad hoc work group. But we also know that that was a group of volunteers sort of who came together for a purpose of creating this product and did it in a quick amount of time and got a little burnt out by it and weren't necessarily it wasn't work. It was like, I think Councilmember Lee, you talked about this, right? It was an add-on and it was to their additional or to their existing workloads. And we and it was a group of people who maybe didn't always have the authority or decision-making capabilities to sort of think through how to really make this kind of part of a culture. I mean, it's a big thing to think about. And so one of the lessons that we really learned from that experience was how critical it was to resource this work, was to ensure we have people in positions where this work is the work of actually implementing this, thinking about training and the data systems we need to track things and all of the sort of details that go into it. There need to be folks who have that as part of their position description. And pretty much everyone in the agency, we need call outs for the fact that doing a REIT and racial equity work is part of their positions. But we also really want to think about the people who are on our core team, our core support team, and on me and Chelsea's team, that have a dedicated part of their actual position description be sort of dedicated to this work. We want that to be built into our agency's structure so that this work continues beyond me and Chelsea or Director Bell, et cetera. So that has influenced quite a bit of what you'll see here. Another thing that influenced the folks who piloted this tool, they provided such valuable feedback to us. And a couple of the things that really came through as we talked to the folks who piloted it were around training and support as people move through the tool, and were around kind of this was really, sort of to a person, everyone said, this was such a great exercise. I thought about things in a way I hadn't thought about them before. These questions are really, really thought provoking and you know, good. However, like, what's next, right? So I answered the questions. What's my next step with this? And so what we also really started to realize is how critical creating what we're now going to call a racial equity action plan, you know, how important that piece of this is to the whole process. So that is going to be kind of part of what we work on in this implementation phase as well, is creating that, okay, we answer these questions. Okay, now what are our big goals, and what are those strategies to meet those goals? And then what are the metrics that we're going to start to measure to see how we're doing, and how often are we sort of going to check back in and see how we're doing, and then go back to the first step if we need to, right? So that was another piece that we really took away, is that we need to sort of be developing that sort of the next tool as part of this implementation phase, so that we can really have the ability to do some evaluation of how this is, again, really truly impacting our decisions in program design, but then also the outputs and outcomes of the programs themselves. And we can see if we're meeting our intended goals as a result of this. So those are a couple of the key lessons I just wanted to highlight, and they sort of inform what we've come up with in terms of our implementation plan. And I guess, yeah, Chelsea, you can probably go to the next slide. So as we've come up with our implementation plan, actually, another thing I wanted to mention was Chelsea talked about how we were able to present this implementation plan to our new project governance committee, which is our sort of the governance committee over what becomes sort of gets the full support of the project management team. The timing of all of this is actually working out really well. It's really fantastic that we have this project management office now, that we were basically the first thing to go to this new project governance committee. We got approved as this agency-wide strategic project, which means we have the full support of that team. And one of the things that team asked us to do was really ensure, again, that we are resourced appropriately. And so, you know, we've been able to meet with each divisional director and identify key people to be on our core team. And one of the other good timing things is there's a number of divisions who have recently hired or are in the process of hiring racial equity strategic advisors within their division. And those are going to, in some cases, those are going to be the folks who sort of sit on our core team and help us think through this implementation. They won't be the person doing the REIT for everyone in their division. That's not our goal, but they will be able to really support the folks in their division doing the REIT, right? And so these are the ways in which we see it really becoming sort of, again, part of the agency culture. So between the project management and a couple of other things that have been happening lately with the project management team, such as that team has also been creating sort of a project inventory that we are all updating on a monthly basis, right? Which is that's going to be a huge tool for us as a team to think about this first success criteria of how are we going to identify which programs and policies will be going through the REIT and when, and how we sort of get consistent around that. We now have this project management team who's really tracking projects across the agency, and not just projects, but sort of how high of a priority those projects are, how many people those kinds of projects touch, capacity of folks working on those projects. So that's really going to help us start to understand, okay, how do we decide which programs and policies are going through this process first? We know we probably, like as Chelsea said, can't do every single program all at once. Folks have limited capacity. So how do we prioritize that? How do we decide what goes through this process at what point? And how do we make sure that this tool is used consistently across program areas, and that it isn't just sort of that Chequity, which is a great term, that Chequity process. So this is What I'm showing you right now, the objective and success criteria, these actually are pulled directly from our new project charter for this, which is because we have that project management office support, we have a project charter, we have our project plan. It's really helpful, I think, as we go along this process to have those kinds of documents. And so we laid out some of our primary objectives and how we will know if we've sort of met those objectives, which is what you see here in the success criteria. So this first one really is about thinking through how we ensure that this tool is actually ready for agency-wide use and is used consistently. So I think go to the next slide. The next objective is around it being really institutionalized within the agency. And this is what we've talked about quite a bit in terms of it really becoming part of our agency culture and agency expectations. And this is where we really want to think about how we ensure that there's the necessary, as I talked about already, sort of staffing for this team and training and support, right? And so we really want to think about when new employees come to the agency and we're doing new employee orientation, how do we ensure we're really talking right away about this tool and expectations around it? And then throughout the process, what we've taught, the ad hoc group I remember talking about quite a bit was really thinking through how to have some supportive spaces for people who are working on the REIT to all come together and talk about what they're learning as they're doing it, sharing information and data across divisions. And learning about kind of how to do it effectively. And so we've talked a lot about whether it's office hours on different sections or just spaces to come together to talk through it. We really find that we think that's going to be a really valuable part of this process to keep people engaged, trained, and learning from each other as they go through the process. So we want to think about how to, again, sort of institutionalize those kinds of processes and make them regular occurrences. And that we absolutely, I mean, we've already got so much feedback, again, from the pilots, from the Equity Lab conversations about ways to improve the tool. And so we want to keep getting that feedback as we're going along and continue to improve the tool over time. As Chelsea said, language changes, expectations change, and we need to be able to keep the tool updated and flexible. We want to make sure people have the latest and greatest data that we're seeing, the latest and greatest sort of resources and guides. We want to be keeping this tool up to date and relevant to folks and ensure that we're responding to the feedback we hear about how it's going as folks are using it. Next slide. This is a super important one. Chelsea's talked about this a lot as well. It was kind of that initial quote from Dr. Zapata that we are ensuring that this tool is actually demonstrably informing our program design and decision making. And so this is where what I discussed, one of our biggest lessons learned was about ensuring we have an actual plan in place after asking the questions and doing the data analysis and the engagement. What's your plan and how are you going to track progress towards meeting the goals and outcomes you said you wanted to kind of meet in terms of reducing racial disparities and improving outcomes for folks. So, so we think it's really important that we do create that racial equity action plan that tracks those goals, metrics, and strategies, and that we are also coming up with some evaluation mechanisms as a result of folks completing the REIT. We want to think about, and this might be a really good conversation to have with you all, how we are then also kind of holding ourselves accountable and being transparent about this. So one of the things we've thought about is, maybe we do an annual report out on the REIT, kind of how many people completed it, what were their, in which ways did it affect their decisions, how did we see the use of the REIT come through in program design and decisions, and what are the metrics that folks have decided to track, and how, and if we're down the line further, what are we seeing in terms of meeting those goals and tracking those metrics. So this is a piece of it that that we want to focus on in that planning as well, in the implementation phase, is what is our evaluation mechanism and how are we looking to all of this. And then I think the last objective is that it helps us better center the experiences of Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, immigrant and refugee and tribal communities to inform decision-making. And so this one, and this is another actually good piece of timing, because we haven't had a ton of sort of engagement, community engagement staff at our agency. We had our integrator team and a few other folks focused on this, but we hadn't had probably enough focus on that and a real community engagement sort of plan and vision. And I think we are really, I know that the Public Affairs Division is really, they just hired some new folks and I think have some other positions out. So we're really ramping up our community engagement staff around the agency. And this one is one we're going to need some work on, and we're going to need to think together on this. But I think we're in an exciting place to really have those conversations and think about how this engagement, how we center this engagement in the work kind of fits in with the rest of the REAP process. So those are sort of the objectives and how we're going to see how we're doing. And I think the next couple of slides are just sort of the kind of what our phases are and our sort of deliverables, which we've primarily gone through already. So it's really just about refining the tool itself and kind of documenting our processes, and coming up with some of the strategies we need to come up with in terms of prioritization. Even things like how are we literally going to, like, where is this all going to be stored? How do we ensure people can collaborate on it? How are we tracking it through a, sort of a tracking system of who's doing REITs when? So those kinds of things are little kind of the logistical pieces we have to work out. And how are we ensuring that we are supporting the work through the, like I said at the end there, the training and the resources. And these are the shorter term deliverables, and then we have longer term deliverables, which were very similar, but sort of just thinking more long term, and again ensuring that we really have that eye on really shifting agency culture and embedding this work into expectations of all agency staff. And I think that might be it, Chelsea. Remember, oh yes, one last slide. Right, for all phases, we really are talking a lot as well about just internal communications. Another good piece of timing, we have a kind of internal communications coordinator now, something we haven't had before, and he's really doing a fantastic job of just getting news out to folks about what's going on around the agency. And so we're going to be leaning on him to ensure people know where we are in the process, what's the core team working on, and kind of getting the word out to folks about this work on a regular basis, so that people really are hearing about it and seeing it and engaging with it. And want to just make sure that we're continuing to do engagement planning and the documentation and tracking that we need to do to make this successful. Now I think that's it. Yeah. So I'll hand it back over to Chelsea, or for some closing thoughts if you have them, or we can just open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I don't think I have additional closing thoughts, but I just will say, this has been quite the labor of love from some really, brilliant folks. And I'm just really grateful. And I'm remembering back to a very early Equity Lab meeting that Councilmember Lee had the opportunity to join us at, which is kind of very early on. This is before the ad hoc work group. So it's really great to be able to come back to you all today and kind of share where we're at. But yes, we definitely want to give some time to open it up for questions, thoughts, curiosities. And so I will mute or Director Bell, if there's anything you wanted to add or any questions you may have, we'll open it up.
Director Bell, did you want to add anything or shall we go to the council?
No, let's dive into it.
All right, Councilmember Rogers.
I just wanted to say that this project is exciting. You all, yes, I can see it's been a labor of love, but I really like the thought that has gone into it. And because I'm a data-driven person, the question that I have is, who are you collaborating with on what tool and how to actually track the data? Because in order for it to be, I think, more effective, yes, you do need to have transparency, and there needs to be a repository that all of the team members can look at in a way that all of the data is grouped together so that somebody can really dig in and do some analysis of it.
I'll take that one. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Rogers. And I do want to make sure I understand, do you mean sort of the data that shows racial disparities specifically around perhaps homeownership rates or things like that? Or do you mean the data of who's doing the REIT and how are we tracking kind of the decisions it's impacting?
Yes, so all of it.
All of it. Yeah. We have, in part of the appendix is us including a number of kind of links to existing data tools that we have. So I, as the Assistant Director for Research, we've been working with our team over the past many years to try to sort of ensure that we have higher quality data that can be disaggregated by race and ethnicity wherever possible, both on kind of our own programs, but also on sort of what are the particular challenges facing Oregonians across the state. So we have a number of resources that we sort of are going to provide to folks as they're actually going through the REIT and have to sort of answer some of those specific data questions. And we think that's a really critical piece as we're thinking about engagement, and community engagement is sort of ground truthing the data we have with community that we're engaging with. And getting additional data from folks that we're engaging with around these issues. So that's sort of that piece of it. And I think that's actually part of the core team conversation as well, is how do we is there sort of a standard way that we want folks to collect data? We have to have some flexibility there for sure, but we may want to also sort of build out a bit of a template that kind of gets us what we need there. So that'll be one of the things the core team sort of talks through as we're documenting all of this and sort of creating a user guide. And then the other question around how we actually track, who's doing it and what, what's resulting from it. That's another question. And we've been lucky enough to have support from our IT team on this. Well, it's not just our programmatic divisions we've been speaking with, but we've also been reaching out to IT and HR and procurement and finance. We've really had conversations with everyone because there's a part for everyone to play in this work. And we will be working with IT on sort of thinking through the best kind of system to use for both tracking a lot of this and also having the ability to store store the REIT itself in a way that allows people to collaborate on it, because we don't want this to be one person just sitting down and answering all the questions and then being done with it, right? We do want this to be a really collaborative process. So I don't have final answers for you on those, but those are all exactly the kinds of things that our core implementation team is going to be sort of figuring out along with our support teams of IT and others.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that's incorporated, because you don't want to get to the end and say, oh yeah, let me involve this team. So thank you for that.
Can I, if it's okay, can I just add maybe one more thought, thing that I was thinking about as we were in this discussion about data. I also think that there's a really cool opportunity for us to continue to, I'm shifting my language from busting down silos to working across the lanes, doing a little bit of lane changing within the division. So I think, I think this is a real prime opportunity for us to support our thinking of kind of across the housing spectrum, right? And so I think as home ownership, as an example, right, high level example, as home ownership might work through this analysis on a particular program, there might be some data that might be coming from our friends in housing stabilization that they can and should be learning from. Maybe maybe housing stabilization has done an analysis on specific programs that might offer some really great opportunity for our friends in home ownership to learn and maybe build on, right? And so I think this is also the opportunity for us to kind of work across our programs and learn across the kind of the specific work that we do, which I think is really exciting.
Councilmember Lee.
Was Councilmember De Fantorum waiting?
Oh, but you put your hand down. Would you like to be heard now, Councilmember De Fantorum?
Thank you. I put my hand down because nobody else was in line. So thank you,
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Lee. I think you may have answered my question, but I want to restate it just to make sure. And thank you for your comment, Councilmember Rogers, because I was also thinking about data. So just to clarify, the tool will be applied to new programs, and part of it is to gather data, right? To see what's working, what's not working. And I never fail to be amazed at how large OHCS is and all the different divisions and just the amount of work and programs that are, part of your daily work. So with the data that's gathered, is the intent to use it to inform and refine program design? Because to me, that would be like the real value of it. And will it be applied to all new programs and then eventually to programs that are in place that are not necessarily new? And Chelsea and Megan, I just want to thank you very much for your work on this. I really love this so much.
Thank you so much, Councilmember De Fantorum. And yes, to answer your question, absolutely, that is the intent of the data analysis, is to A, understand where existing disparities lie, and then B, look at what we're currently doing and how, to the extent we have it, how we're seeing outcomes differ by race and ethnicity and other intersectionalities, as Chelsea pointed out, to see if there are places where we're just missing the mark or places where we're doing really well. And we can sort of then start to think through the strategies we want to employ to continue doing those things well, or change course if we're not meeting our goals. So yes, that's absolutely the goal of the data analysis. And was there another question? Shoot, I think that was that it? I hope that was it.
Councilmember Lee, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chair
I'm
Hall.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the second part of the question was how it will be applied just to new programs, or will it also eventually be applied to existing programs?
Yes, thank you. And yes, we the intention is to start with sort of high priority new programs, but absolutely we want kind of the intention, and I think it's built in there, says to also review existing programs, specifically when they are maybe going through a significant change or kind of new rules or things like that, but eventually everything. So that's another thing that we need to really work out as part of this kind of core team. What is our sort of prioritization of programs here? Because we do have quite a few, as you've all noticed, and more coming. And so we do want to be really thoughtful about people's capacity, and I think we can also think about how to get creative with this and do some things to get some programs sort of at the same time, or like Chelsea said, doing some lane changing. So those are the things to work out as we think through the process here. But absolutely, the intention is hopefully to kind of get through everything at some point.
Okay, Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I've got just a random variety of comments and musings and questions and reflections, none of which need to be responded to in this moment, just adding to the conversation. I want to start first by just saying thank you. Just thank you. Acknowledging your work, acknowledging the work of the group, acknowledging the work of the organization, just thank you. It's really an emotional moment to think about where we were building the first statewide housing plan, and the fact that virtually nothing could be said in the racial justice category other than we should think about how to think about this, right? And to be at this moment is a big deal. So I just wanted to say thank you to that. I love this idea about the core model. The core team model. I think it's a strong one. I think it makes sense to think about an agency as large as OHCS, as this collaboration of people are doing a lot of work in a lot of the different program areas, and then coming together for that kind of co-creation and collaboration, I think is super duper strong. I want to also ask, and this is an earlier slide, you don't need to go back to it. You all are working on a racial impact statement for the budget ask. I wonder about the role for the council on that, right? This council must show up in all the ways that we're asking staff to show up. The council has to show up as well. And I wonder if we applied some of the questions or reflections in the tool to ourselves, what we might say, what we might learn, at the very least, adding a statement from the council to the agency's racial impact statement for the budget request, I think would be a very important and appropriate one. And I'd like to figure out, Director Ball, you can tell us, if this is appropriate or possible, but I would certainly urge us as a council to be able to make that statement and participate in supporting the staff analysis for the budget ask. I have a couple of questions about our language. In my organization, we have done similar types of process, and we have made the policy commitment to what we call inclusively lead with race. And so that we are unapologetically speaking to the fact that in almost every dimension and in almost every measure and in almost every piece of data, the impact where disparities live the most is based on race and ethnicity. Now, Director Bunch, as you said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get your title. I was just going to call you Chelsea. Chelsea, as you said, we all don't live in one dimension, right? We all are multitudes of identities and realities. And so this understanding of inclusively leading with race, speaking to all of those multiple identities and realities that each of us bring into the world and into the table, and not moving away from centering race and ethnicity. And I would like to see us struggle a little bit more with that. I know that that is a scary idea. I know that that is a challenging idea for some of us, and I think it's the place where we need to go. On that same note, I wonder about the use of equity rather than justice. For me, and it links into some of this forward-looking and forward stance of the tool and the efforts, which is looking at what is to come, trying to make sure that what is to come is equitable. For me, what's missing out of that, and as part of my definition as justice, is repair for past and current harm. It's not simply enough for us to say the next new project or the next new dollar shall be administered in a way that is in alignment with the data that we found, and sort of equal in that way or equitable in that way, whether you want to use one of both of those words, without having this understanding that we didn't get to this place on accident. We got to this place because of structural and real racism and white supremacy culture that has harmed people and communities of color from its inception. And we have a responsibility as a governmental agency to own that, acknowledge it, and do something about it. And that, to me, is encompassed into my definition of justice. So again, this is not a semantic point that I'm trying to make with us. I want us, whether we call it racial equity or racial justice, words matter. And what matters more, and then the words even, is what we mean by the words. And I think we've got to push ourselves to understand the repair. I'm not going to use the big R word because I know that scares people. Repair, which means we got to do something more than simply trying trying to achieve, because we don't have it yet, equity. So that's not a criticism. That's not a, you haven't done enough. That's where are we going next? I want to again contextualize my request for us to take a day of reflection and planning for all of this new work that's coming. Because as you have mentioned many times, this takes work and this takes capacity. We don't take the time to do it. The thing that gets dropped off is racial justice. When we are pushed, when our work can't be done in the time that it needs to be done, what we let go to the side is the racial justice work. So again, as we practice this tool, we practice a mindset, how could a decision to spend time at the council and with staff to talk about getting prepared and moving forward, how is that seen as a racial justice act or supporting our racial equity agenda or those kinds of things? And that's, I think, what you're calling us in to do from the agency, was just not to look at decisions or perspectives, but to ask what is the racial dynamic or impact, intentional or not, of that discussion of those issues. And then the final thing I'll say after I again just say so much love for you and the team. We have to be able to look both individually and systemically. And I think that's going to be the challenge of the data, because we're going to be able to say this project did this or not, that project did this or not, we have this data about this or not. And our challenge is going to be take that information and get it to the systems level, because we, as you know, I love to say, are a probably close to $5 billion public bank. We have to look at the systems that are engaged there. So I just salute everyone. I send you such love and respect. I thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Farrell.
It's always hard to follow.
Wait a
Mary
minute.
Lee.
Council Member DeFontorum, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Let's get
sorry.
back.
I'll defer to you.
Council Member Farrell.
Oh, thank you. She actually was ahead of me, but I'll go ahead and I'm just responding in support of Council Member Lee's comment. I think one of the things that I look at and that kind of rolls around when you're looking at like this tool, I love the idea that it's going to be applied to all new programs, but I also think, what about the existing programs that are like not just undersubscribed, but not subscribed to at all by like Indigenous folks? I know we have that conversation all the time. It's like, well, we have this set aside for like Indigenous communities, but nobody's applying. And so really looking at things through that lens, the existing programs, and not just how come people aren't, applying for funds, but how do we change that? How do we really shift that to where existing programs make sense to existing providers or people that aren't applying at all? And I don't want to take all the time out of the discussion, but I just wanted to echo what Councilmember Lee was saying. And did she leave? I don't see her. Anyway, she is a hard one to follow, Mary. I always cringe or hesitate to say anything after she's spoken because she's so articulate and eloquent. Anyway, thank you for letting me jump in front of you, Mary.
No problem.
Hey, Councilmember Farrell.
I also just echo a lot of the comments that already have been made. I appreciate this work. It's still sometimes surprising to me that it's 2023 and this isn't something we've already had and been doing for a really long time. The only piece that I still kind of continue to look for in some more solid format is, I guess, the accountability piece. And I can appreciate where Mary Lee is coming from in the sense of repair as part of accountability. I just still am sort of wondering what is the accountability if we've got agencies who are engaging that we're continuing to support through funds that we have sort of known challenges with. I mean, obviously there's all the opportunity to train and repair and try to engage them with this framework, but there still has to be some discussion on accountability, or it's all just really good thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think Councilmember Farrell, I think what I may be hearing in your comment is beyond accountability for our kind of use of the tool itself and how it shifts our program design, how, like, what's the interplay of accountability with our partners who we then invest in, right? And I think that's an important question. I think that is one that our core team will certainly be wrestling with. I think that by the nature of staff being able to walk through the tool, our hope is that they're going to begin to answer or ask some different questions, within those programs, as they're beginning to interface, or as they do interface with their partners, right? As they're learning more, their questions may shift to partners about, what they aim to do and how their mission comes into alignment with our racial justice values. And so I think it's such a perfect question, and one that we absolutely will be thinking through, and hope to come back to you all with some more thoughts as we move into implementation a little bit more deeply. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Claire Hall, if I may,
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell, your comments and reflections, there's so much value in that. And I think there's a couple things I would like to just bring into the space to consider, because I think we do expect to further engage the council in this and also seek very specific areas of advisement and guidance in this. What I would add into this, while it is, I want to preface that it's not an answer, the way for me, like from my seat in the work with the team, that as I've been exploring around the accountability, I think first and foremost, what I think this provides for us is an opportunity for accountability in the light and in the dark. It's really easy when you don't know something to say, well, I didn't know. So therefore, next time when I do know, and when I do have more information, I will make a better and more informed decision. And so for me, thinking about our role as a government agency, thinking about our role in constructing some of the very issues that we're trying to untangle ourselves out of, it presents an opportunity for us as an agency to make more informed decisions towards racial justice all the time, when people are looking and when people are not looking. And to me, that is a big part of accountability. That is a really big piece of accountability, is making the best decisions with what you have from a racial justice lens and perspective at all points, I also think, to your other question around what does this mean for our grantee partners? One, I think just by proxy of us bringing this conversation into a public space, our intention amongst many of them is for this to be a collective journey to model living out and aspiring towards our vision and watching us fumble along the way. Our hope is that if you see us as a government agency doing it, I mentioned earlier that government can't be a rock. And if our infrastructure, if our bureaucracy can shift and evolve, we have a lot of hope and confidence and optimism that others can as well. And we want to be a model for that. In modeling that, we also have accountability to make sure that we are resourcing and investing in our partners to have the capacity to make the types of shift that they can and that they aspire towards racial justice in their work. I believe in across Oregon communities, there are so many folks that want to further advance racial justice based on the goals and the uniqueness of their community, but perhaps they haven't been resourced to do it. You know, we have the good fortune of being in a place with CEI where we can do that today. We were not always in a resource place where we could make those types of investments to do that. And so I think, Councilmember Farrell, one of the reflections I have is how do we facilitate those same opportunities across the state for learning and advancing as well.
Okay. Any other council members who would like to share questions, reflections, comments on this quite important work? Well then, thank you again, Director Bunch and team, for a great presentation. important work and glad to see it continuing to move forward. Now we're going to move on to the Affordable Rental Housing Division section of our agenda. And Director Natasha Detweiler Dobby. Natasha, are you and your team ready to go?
You sure are. Thank you very much, Chair Hall, Executive Director Bell, and council members. This is Natasha Detweiler Davy. Nice to see you all this morning. It's still the morning. Double checked there. So I think before we get into our slate of transactions here this morning, I just wanted to regroup. I guess, over the many items covered this morning, we have, I provided by email, and it's now, I believe, also posted to the Housing Stability Council webpage, our update on engagement around with Milepost 5, continuing to keep engaged and ensure that we are working towards solution that's centering tenants and health and safety at the property. We are also just, kind of dovetailing here from all of that incredible information from the REIT. I wanted to loop back, I know on robust dialogue that we had last month around tenant demographics and collections. I will see some of that information today, and we're going to continue to use it, rely on it, and center as much of our efforts as we can to support that work. We have issued a technical advisory in the past few weeks to all of our project owners and operators, re-emphasizing the importance of collecting and reporting this information to us on the basis that we are now able to actually use it and intend to do so. So I'm very excited about that, as well as some all of this other work that has been going on over the past year and more to be able to evolve our efforts around holding to accountability, doing data tracking and reporting, as you saw some of that initial information last month from Claudia in the MWSB report, which is all really important as we align to make ourselves impactful and demonstrate that work moving forward. And so I guess lastly, I did also just want to echo thanks and appreciation for Barb over your guidance and support and direction over your years in service and partnership. We will indeed miss you, and but I think have some very concrete lessons that you've instilled over the years that will continue to resonate and draw focus and attention where needed. So I really do appreciate that. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Ty to introduce our first transaction for Colonia Paz, and I will share my screen in just a second here. Ty, go ahead.
Still good morning, Chair Hall, council members, Director Bell. For the record, my name is Ty Dunston-Strain, production manager, OHCS, and I'm here to present Colonia Paz 2. It's a project in Lebanon and sponsored by Rural Housing Development Corporation. It's a 116 units, includes a variety of affordability. The total project cost is around 33 million, but we're here seeking an additional bonds. The project had we previously allocated conduit bonds, but due to unanticipated delays in interest rates, the project needed to come back to receive an additional allocation of tax-exempt bonds to move forward in order to qualify for a key ratio with having the proportionality of tax-exempt bonds to eligible basis for tax credits, there needed to be a second issuance to make sure that proportion is balanced according to IRS guidelines. And it's the it's the 50% test rule that's basically required of all tax credits when paired with tax exempt bonds. With the project, if granted funding, will be back on track, and units will be ready for occupation. Then as far as the statewide housing plan goes, it meets the affordable rental housing, equity, and racial justice in rural communities. And with that, if there's any, I'm here to answer any questions or ask that you consider the motion.
Council members, questions? Wow. We're rarely this quiet group, so I'm going to assume you're ready to proceed with a motion on approving this project.
So moved.
Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Rogers, your hand's up.
Sorry, I couldn't find my button fast enough, but just wanted to comment on the comment saying that for MWESB, they're not actively furthering equity and racial justice. Are they not being challenged because we're just helping them meet the requirements of moving the project forward due to the increased cost? I just wanted some additional clarification about that.
Yeah. So the MWSB portion, so they still are required to meet our MWSB goals under the previous approval, and so those goals were met, and now we're and that portion wasn't attached to this write-up, but we can certainly provide the first approval that showed that they were meeting our MWSB goals for the project.
Hey, other council members with questions or feedback? Let's see. One final call. We already have a motion for approval from Councilmember Higginbotham. Would somebody like to second the motion, please?
Second.
Thanks. And if we could now have a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall, council members. Councilmember DeFantorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee. Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thanks, everyone. And I noticed that Councilmember Lee has stepped away. She said she would have to leave the meeting for about an hour, but she will be returning. So we're ready to move on to the next Affordable Housing Rental Division item, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Hall. With me is, I see him starting his screen share, Martin Jarvis, Program Analyst. I'll hand it over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Natasha. Good morning, Chair Hall, Director Bell, council members. For the record, my name is Martin Jarvis, State Tax Credits Program Analyst in the Development Resources and Production section. I am here to recommend Bellow Woods Apartments for an allocation of push preservation resources. Bellow Woods Apartments is sponsored by Bridge Housing Corporation. This project will preserve 64 units of affordable housing located in the city of Beaverton in Washington County. This project promotes OHCS's affordable rental housing priority and provides family-size units. Bellow Woods LIHTC restrictions were set to expire in December of 2021. Bridge, the Housing Authority of Washington County, and OHCS have been working to acquire the building, and Bridge has been voluntarily extending the affordability restrictions on a short-term basis. Push award would preserve the project for an additional 60-year period. There are no current resident services provided, but Bridge plans to partner with Impact Northwest to provide services. The resident services provider will survey the needs of the community before setting up any services. Impact Northwest's standard resident services offerings include resource referrals, community building activities, parenting support, after-school programs, and employment and career planning. Bellow Woods is working toward meeting agency standards on equity and racial justice. Bellow Woods is not currently required to submit demographic details, data to OHS. They will be required to do so moving forward if this funding recommendation is approved. However, Bridge did send over the demographic data that they had currently available. There was not a meaningful response rate on the race question, but there was an excellent response rate on the ethnicity question. As you can see on this slide, a significant majority of the residents identify as Hispanic or Latino. The comparison to the census data of the wider community indicates the tenant population is overall more diverse. The sponsors are requesting $9 million in push preservation funds. I'm happy to discuss any questions you might have on the materials as presented, and otherwise ask you to consider the motion on page 47 of your packet.
Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to thank Bridge for really stepping in and preserving this valuable affordable housing project. I think they were the only ones that were able to make it happen, and with that, we'll be preserving some very much needed affordable housing units. So thank you for all that work.
Hey, anybody else from the council? Not, I would encourage a motion to approve these recommendations.
Move to approve.
And is there a second? Okay, we've got a motion and a second, and now a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I just will add a little commentary here. I think echoing Javier's comments as well as Martin's. And when we say that we've been working on this, it's a lot of work from a lot of different parties for a long period of time. And so each of these preservation efforts where you have a project at risk of loss, it is a tremendous amount of coordination and collaboration that really brings these to success, really centering on making sure that those tenants are able to have a stable living environment. So really exciting to see this happen, and applaud and thank everybody for their respective parts. And so next up, we have Martin again with a wildfire preservation recommendation.
Thank you, Natasha. I'm now here to recommend Anderson Vista Apartments for an allocation of wildfire preservation resources. We included $2.5 million in wildfire funds in the combined pools application as a potential funding source for preservation projects damaged by the 2020 wildfires. Anderson Vista is sponsored by the Housing Authority of Jackson County. Anderson Vista will rebuild and preserve 36 units of affordable housing located in the city of Talent in Jackson County. This project promotes OHCS's affordable rental housing priority, our rural priority, and will also provide family-sized units. Anderson Vista was originally built in 1996 using USDA RD funds. The property was significantly damaged by the Alameda fire on September 7th, 2020. 22 of the units and the community building were completely destroyed. Currently, the project is entirely vacant. With the wildfire preservation funds, Housing Authority of Jackson County intends to rebuild the destroyed units and rehab the remaining units to put the housing back into operation. Resident services will be available by referral. Housing Authority of Jackson County is working toward equity and racial justice goals. The sponsor is, one follow-up. There is no current demographic data available for Anderson Vista on account of it being completely vacant right now and having been vacant for the last 3 years. The sponsor is requesting $2.5 million in wildfire preservation funds. I'm happy to discuss any questions on the materials as presented and otherwise ask you to consider the motion on page 51 of your packet.
Questions from the council? Questions from the council? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second, please.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and now could we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And one more item on the Affordable Rental Housing Division docket.
Yes, last but certainly not least, we have Ed Brown here with a manufactured park preservation recommendation.
Yes, and bear with me just one moment while I set up my slides. And also, can I please just confirm, is everyone able to hear me okay? Great. All right. And I believe that's up there correctly. All right. Good morning, Council, Chair Hall, and Director Bell. I am Edward Brown. I'm a program analyst with the Affordable Rental Housing Division. I prefer he, him pronouns. I'm here to present a manufactured dwelling park preservation grant request to preserve the affordability of this manufactured park and to facilitate ownership of the park to the resident-owned cooperative. Pioneer Park Residents Cooperative is requesting $8,112,000 in General Housing Account Program grant funds to help acquire the park that has 104 spaces for family homes and to aid in infrastructure improvements that include health and safety improvements and reconditioning of roads so that they last long into the affordability period. This project is meeting OHCS equity and racial justice goals. The park is located in Lafayette, Oregon, in Yamhill County. The owner of the park was given an unsolicited offer to purchase this park, and that kicked off a series of events to get to where the park cooperative is today. CASA of Oregon is a consultant in this project, and the park is also a member of ROC USA, which is Resident-Owned Communities USA. With that, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to the council if there are any questions or clarifications that you'd like to have, and otherwise, please consider the motion for funding this project.
Council members? Councilmember Mena?
There you go. Again, another good work in terms of preservation and a mobile home park. It's an amazing type of housing that is desperately needed, and we can't lose. So I greatly appreciate the work of CASA, the members of the community, and obviously OHDC. So good job. Thank you.
Anybody else? Excuse me. Always great to see these types of projects. Well, all types of projects go forward, but I'm reflecting on the help that we were able to provide with the acquisition of the Harbor Village manufactured home park here in November. And I really don't think there's a lot of awareness beyond the folks who are tenants in the park of what a spectacular save that was of several hundred affordable units, but folks who mattered know and have been really grateful for the opportunity to make the park their own. So, is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
All righty, we've got a motion and a second, and now could we get a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Minna.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Great work again, everybody. We are at the point in the agenda, although we're ahead of schedule, we're at the point of the agenda where we're scheduled for our 15-minute break. So how about if we go ahead and do that now and plan to reconvene at 11:45 with the homeownership divisions.
Chair Hall, if I may make a.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just a very quick logistic point for anybody that's participating or listening in. My apologies for interrupting you, Chair Hall.
No.
At the conclusion of the break, once we return, I will step off, and in my place, our Deputy Director, Caleb Yount, will serve in my place and continue on unabated, Chair Hall.
All right.
All right.
So we are now in recess. We'll reconvene at 11:45. Hey, we are a couple of minutes now past our scheduled time to reconvene, and I see Councilmember Rogers. Not sure who else has returned from the council. Any other council members are back online, please?
Barb's here.
Okay. So that's 3 of us.
Sammy Joe DeFontorum here, Chair Hall.
Oh, hi, thanks. Okay, that gives us 4. I think we need one more person to be able to have a quorum and reconvene.
I see Mary. Did you count her?
Oh, no. Which Mary?
Mary Farrell.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. For some reason now it's just giving me a single box at a time of our Brady Bunch checkerboard. So with 5 members online, I believe we can reconvene. And we have begun recording. And do we have, well, I should have also asked Kim Freeman, Homeownership Division, are you ready? Is your team ready to take this next section?
Chair Hall, we are ready.
Okay, the floor is yours, and thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Hall, Deputy Director Yant. I have to think about a different welcome here, and council members. For the record, I'm Kim Freeman, Assistant Director to Homeownership Programs. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to take this quick moment just to say thank you to Barb for all her work with our homeownership centers, providing services to her community, down payment assistance, gosh, foreclosure counseling. I know Alicia's on here too. So Barb and her team have just been really great partners to work with and always helping us for process improvement and sharing ideas. So Barb, wish you the best. And I love always seeing your cabin pictures in the background. So I know that you will be enjoying your cabin immensely soon. So with that, I do have one Oregon Bond residential loan program for your consent today. This property is located in Marion County, happens to be in Silverton, which is a great community. It meets all of our programmatic requirements as always, and I'm just here for your approval, and which the motion is stated on page 62. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions from any of the council? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
All right, could we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFontorum.
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell.
Yes.
Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena. Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody. And Assistant Director Freeman, continue, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Again, for the record, I'm Kim Freeman, Assistant Director to Homeownership Programs. With me today is Cheryl Lyons, who's our Oregon Bond Residential Loan Specialist. And oh, Stephen, I totally forgot your name, so I'm so sorry. Stephen Cornwell, who's our Data and Research Analyst specifically for homeownership. For those on the council that have been on council for the last several years, this is what I call the Emmys of the Oregon Bond Program, because I get to highlight what we did in 2022. And I always say, I wish we had a red carpet when we're virtual and everyone's, you know, dressed in their favorite outfits and we're all glammed up. But this is my honor to share our results of the program and also honor our top loan officer and a top lender when we finish our presentation. So Stephen and I are going to share the PowerPoint presentation. Cheryl is going to be my behind the scenes prompter of sharing her screen and sharing some of the slides, and I'm going to talk you through some of our highlights for the year. Cheryl, you want to go ahead and share your screen? Go ahead and go to slide 2. So here's our highlights for the year. We had 504 loans that we originated for this lovely amount here of over 151 million, and we served 29 counties. We will, oh, sorry, Cheryl, before you move on, in a slide, a few slides down, I will show you the county breakdown of the counties served, because I think it's really important to see our statewide coverage. Okay, Cheryl, go ahead to slide 2. So this is our current market, our current mortgage rates. As many of you know, the mortgage industry has been pretty volatile with rates every day, you know, up, down, almost putting homeowners to the purchase to buy a home out of sight. We were fortunate to be able to reduce our rates as of February 23rd for our rate advantage to 5% and our cash advantage to 5.75. And our cash advantage program does offer 3% grant for closing costs. One thing I want to share about this year specifically about our mortgage rates is we adjusted them 13 times, which is probably history for us, at least since I've been with the agency. I've been in this position 8 years, and I don't recall a year that we normally have adjusted our rates more than once or twice. So this past year, we were extremely busy monitoring the current mortgage environment, monitoring our rates, working really closely with our debt management team. So a shout out to our debt management team for assisting us with this as well. And just to put a little context on how our rates are so important to first-time home buyers, the current mortgage market rates are currently over 6%. So most everyone that is here today knows how important a lower mortgage interest rate is to assist home buyers, and especially the home buyers that we serve through the bond program, which is first-time home buyers. Slide 3, Cheryl, or 4, sorry. Yep, 3. So here's our production over the last 6 years. So you can see, you know, we hover around 600, and 2018, just for some history, was one of our best years ever. And that's just because we had a lot of private activity bond funding that we were able to use, some carry forward. And so this is what has helped us with our production in that year. We ended 2022 with 504 loans, and this really was a great year for us, only because, again, going back to where 2022 with the mortgage market volatility, we didn't know really how we would do production wise. So a year with 504 ending is a great year for us. Next slide, Cheryl. Thank you. And then this is just a breakdown of the types of mortgages. So FHA, USDA, uninsured, and then our veterans. So in 2022, we did 24 veterans loans, and I also like to call that out because I think that's really important. So this is the federal VA mortgage loan, which is 100% financing for the veteran, and so that means that our mortgage rates, again, are lower, so it does help our veterans. Next slide, Cheryl. Here is our breakdown of the counties served. Again, Multnomah remains to be our highest county with number of loans of 112. But I also want to call out on the bottom right, we've had Grant County, Tillamook, Lake, Wasco, Wallowa, Gilliam, and Baker. These are reside on the eastern side, but again, we are serving pretty much statewide. There are 36 counties, so we're missing a few, but we're pretty strong at serving 29 counties for the last several years. Here's some highlights. We provided 4 lender trainings. We onboarded, or we put in our system, 86 new loan officers, and if anyone's have been following, that is probably 50 more than we've done in many years. But again, due to the current markets and what's happening in our mortgage industry, a lot of loan officers have just switched companies. So if they were with a previous lender and they moved to a different one, we still count them as a new lender or a new loan officer within that company. Language spoken. This hasn't changed much over the last several years, but again, these are the languages spoken by our loan officers. And we also have 2 people that provide sign language to our deaf and hard of hearing population. So we can see we have lots of Spanish loan officers, we have Chinese, Japanese. It's a good mix, and we do keep these updated within our database. So if we do have a prospective homeowner whom may be searching for someone to speak their language, their native language, we have that available for them. Okay. We're going to talk a lot about some demographics in the next couple of slides, but I want to give you a little context of what you're going to be hearing in the next few slides. You've heard a lot of conversation earlier about demographics, our equity racial justice work, and this is something that we work really, really closely with our loan officers and our lenders. So when you are a home buyer and you are completing your mortgage loan application, there is a specific section in there that calls out for you to list your demographic information. Not all home buyers list that. And what was happening in our world is over the course of several years, when I would come to present to council our unknowns, that means that a home buyer did not select their race and ethnicity to share. Our unknowns was increasing. And I don't know if Councilor Mary Lee has rejoined us, but a few years ago, Councilor Lee asked us to try something, even if it didn't work. So we took that to heart, and our team at the time, which was Chris Knight and Cheryl Lyons, created our own data demographic form that we include in the mortgage loan package, and it comes back to us once the mortgage loan is closed. So when the home buyer is in escrow signing their documents, they also have our data demographic form. And it's the same information that's on their mortgage loan application, but we go into depth why the demographics are important to us. And it's really to say we want to know who we're serving, but we also reference our OHCS website along with the Tableau dashboard, so they can go back and look and see how we're doing as an agency. So in 2020, we developed the form, and our whole plan was to launch the form in 2020. As you know, 2020 was when the pandemic happened, and so just with all the unknowns of that, we didn't launch the form. But we did launch it in 2021. And of the 434 loans that we did in 2021, 259 of those included our demographic data form. At that time, we didn't differentiate the data if it was received from our data demographic form or from the mortgage loan application. In 2022, we improved our process. And so I'm going to give a shout out again to Cheryl Lyons, because she is the person who reviews our loan files, ensures our data is accurate and correct in our system, and who is also tracking these data, our data demographic form. So of the 504 loans, we received 358 completed demographics forms returned. So that's 71% of our loan production. This slide breaks down the breakdown of those 358 responses. So 289 of those have the same information on the mortgage loan application and our form. 63 forms had different information between the mortgage loan application and our form. And so we used our form in 45 of those. We still have unknowns being reported, and I think we always will have unknowns, but our goal is to decrease those unknowns. And we have some more information on another slide of that. What we're going to continue to do in 2023 is we already have identified some loan officers and lenders specifically who are not completing this form and returning it with their completed loan packages. So we will be gathering that data. We will be working with those lenders and loan officers to ensure they understand the importance of our document and why it's important, and also help them understand as a company that they should be looking at their data, their demographic data as well. So hopefully when I'm back next year, I can report that we will be at 100% or pretty darn close to that. And at this time, we're on slide 8. No, go ahead, Cheryl, you're good. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, and he's going to walk through some of the data specifically in reference to the bond, the Oregon Bond Residential Loan Program, and also some housing data that he has captured, which I think will just put some more context on the conversation that we're seeing today with our production, the volatility in the market, current home prices, and what our potential home buyers are experiencing across the state. Stephen?
Thank you, Kim. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Greetings to Chair Hall, the directors, and our lovely council members. For the record, I'm Stephen Cornwall, the homeownership research analyst, and I'd like to take you on a brief journey through the demographic trends we've been seeing within OBRL, and as Kim said, touch a bit on the state of homeownership in Oregon. So To begin here, you can see that with the efforts of our wonderful loan officers combined with the new demographics data for that we're moving in the right direction. You can see that 30% of OBRL borrowers and co-borrowers identify as people of color, 57% as white, non-Hispanic, and 11% are determined as unknown. So comparing this to 2021, where it was 27% people of color and 12% unknowns, we're seeing an improvement in identifying more individuals and serving harder to reach communities. And I would also like to note that from judging from the trends that I'm seeing within the data, I suspect the amount of unknowns will only continue to decrease as time goes on. That's something that we love to see, and that's something that will help us serve our community better. So hoorah to more user-friendly forms. Next slide. Now, here we can get a pretty good idea of the type of households we're providing service to. Categorizing by sex, 48% of our clients are female, while 46% are male. And breaking it down by marital status, for female, 12% are married, 36% are unmarried, and 0.2% are separated. For male, 25% are unmarried, 21% are married, and no info on those that are separated. And to get a little mean, and by that, I mean average, the average household size is 2.5. The average age is 38 years old. And we're seeing that the average price of a home purchase with the help of OBRL is around $340,000. Next slide. Here we can see the racial makeup of our borrowers, only for the borrowers, where compared to 2021, we saw an increase in those that identify as American Indian, Latin American, and Asian. Next slide. And this is for co-borrowers. We also saw an increase with American Indians and a decrease in the number of unknowns, which is good. That's good. Next slide. And this is for ethnicity, just for the borrowers. We saw a sizable increase in those that identify as Hispanic, going from 49 to 85 people, almost doubling 2021's number. Next slide. And for co-borrowers, we see the same trend again, going from 11 to 34 people identifying as Hispanic. Next slide. On this slide right here, hope everyone can see it. Just some additional graphs showing the number of borrowers by race and ethnicity, and to put plainly, the effects of the pandemic. You can see there's a big dip mid-2020 to 2021, but it's picking up, it's picking up. Next slide. And as promised, a very brief overview on the state of homeownership in Oregon. And let's start with the sales price, which for 2022 was the average sales price was $377,645, which of course is an increase from 2021, where the average sales price was $338,551. So this is roughly an 11% increase, or what could be considered a reasonable down payment on a house. So, and I don't know if you can see the counties there. Yes, the average is heavily skewed by counties overlapping metro areas. Another interesting tidbit is that in 2022, Deschutes overtook Clackamas, hope I got that right, as Oregon's most expensive county to purchase a home, which tracks because according to the census, Deschutes grew more rapidly, more than any other Oregon county over the past decade. And I'm sure the recent tech work migration also had an impact on the sales price that we're seeing there. So to sum this chart up, to no one's surprise, purchasing a home is getting even more expensive. And this is not something that's exclusive to the metro areas. A lot of our rural communities are seeing rapid increases in prices as well. Next slide. And I tried showing the median prices because usually that's more helpful when assessing the housing market, but it's the same trend. And also here, also included the average price of new constructions, which is even more expensive, coming in at an average price of $456,635. And to add some context to that, before the pandemic, it was around $325,000. So interesting situation. Next slide. And for my final slide, which deals with home affordability, you can get a sense of the cost associated with owning a home in the current market at the medians. So we're talking about households making the area median income and owning a median price home. And according to Fed, I got this data from the Atlanta Fed. If we compare Oregon to the national median, home affordability in Oregon is not so reasonable. Note, the info presented here mainly concerns the metro areas because of data limitations. Hope that can change one day. So using Portland as the example here, and this is for last November, for a household entering the market with a household median income of around $81,000 and looking to own a median price home, which is around $529,000, the annual cost to own that home would take up 54% of their income. For reference, the standard used by HUD is that this rate should not exceed 30%. So it's a bit alarming, and even at the national level, we can see this rate is at 44%. I wanted to include that we could try to be optimistic because there is a downward trend that's going on. It's the first winter period where we see that the prices are going down, and that's the first that has happened since the pandemic. But I know better not to be optimistic when it comes to stuff like this. And of course, it's important to note that the Fed, as far as I know, don't have the ability to give us a complete objective version of reality. But I think the data provided here is pretty close to what we can all sense. We have a housing issue. And I'll give a moment so everyone can take a peek at the rest of the metro areas that are shared here. A cool one to look at is Newport. And that's all I have for you lovely folks. So this means this presentation can go on to something a bit more positive. Passing it back to Kim.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that, and it really does share, as this council knows, and many partners that we work with for homeownership development, the cost of owning a home is constantly increasing. So, but it is a good reminder, and it's great to see how this, compares statewide, because we are providing coverage statewide. So, Stephen, thank you for your work and joining me today. I really appreciate it. And as Stephen said, we're going to go on to something positive. Chair Hall and council members, it actually says on the agenda, it's the DPA presentation, but since I still have the floor, I would like to take this opportunity at this time, because it's a continuation of all this great work for the Oregon Bond Residential Loan Program, to honor our top loan officer, which is Vince Kingston. And I know he's on the line. So Vince, if you could turn your camera on so we can all see you. Vince is our top loan officer for 2022. He also was our top loan officer for 2020. So he had 30 loans originated in 2022. Just to give you a little history about Vince. He's been working in this industry since 2004. He loves to help people accomplish their real estate dreams and financial goals. He is passionate about helping first-time home buyers and working with our program, as you can see, again, being our top loan officer. He does many things outside of his work career, and At this time, I would like Vince, if you could, just to say a few words and why you use our program and what drives you to help first-time homebuyers.
Great, Kim. Thank you so much for the forum. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a real honor. I really appreciate, being highlighted here. And I want to reflect back to you guys how important the Oregon bond is. So I want to double down on what Steven said. It's a crisis, guys. I mean, I spend my entire day basically speaking with people who make good income, who cannot buy a home in the Portland metro region for their family. And it's sad. It's sad for them. It's exhausting for us. And so what I want to be clear about is that the Oregon bond, especially right now, I cannot thank you enough for lowering that rate to 5%. I don't know the machinations that go on behind the scenes, but right now, as of today, an interest rate's easily 7% or higher. That's a normal market rate, even if you have perfect credit. So the difference between a 7% and a 5% rate advantage, that's almost $100,000 of affordability. And it's an absolute lifeline for people out there. I mean, there's people who will never be homeowners unless they're able to utilize that 5% rate. And so I just want to double down on what Steven said. It's getting very, very difficult. Even at the low 6 digits, if you have debt, you just can't afford our median home price in Portland, Oregon right now at a market rate of 7%. So thank you so much for your effort. I appreciate being here. And Cheryl, I want to thank Cheryl too. She helps us on a daily basis, nuts and bolts. So I wanted to give her a shout out. Really appreciate my team, and I really appreciate you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Vince. We appreciate those comments. At this time, to no surprise to any of us, our top lender is Guild Mortgage. They, as a company, produced 221 loans for us. Erin Watts is not able to attend today. She had a conflict come up last minute, but Erin is someone that I coordinate a lot with, and she is the Vice President of Product Strategy. And I can, since she is not here, she wanted me to share that Guild is very honored to accept this award again. This is the 4th straight year. So thanks to Guild Mortgage and all the loan officers out there who support our program. But most importantly, I know from a housing finance agency perspective, Guild works with probably most of our housing finance agencies. And so they support us in all of our products, and especially helping first-time home buyers. A little bit about Guild is they were founded in 1960, and they provide lending opportunities in 49 states and the District of Columbia. So they're almost in all 50 states. And again, my shout out to both Guild Mortgage, Vince Kingston of Guild Mortgage, and I have both for them each another trophy. So Vince, I'm going to be mailing you another kind of plaque trophy for you to display wherever, home office, your office, wherever you feel to display that. And then the Guild Mortgage one will be going to the local office here in Portland, not back to Erin, who is I believe in Texas, I believe. And so she wants it to stay here locally. So with that, I would just open it if there's any questions to council about any of the data or information that was shared today. But I do want to just remind everyone that all of the information, minus the last part about housing prices, is listed on our Tableau dashboard, and the link is here. And our Tableau dashboard has all of our programs within homeownership, what we're doing as far as, what our homeownership centers are providing, our down payment assistance, obviously our Oregon Bond residential loan program. We have information about our LIFT program, which is our homeownership development. So we work really closely with Steven and the data and research team to ensure that the data that's reported from our partners is uploaded and is visible for everyone to share. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
So I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you both to Kim and Steven for presenting that information. What a bunch of powerful information we have. And I think we all kind of knew that it was that bad, but just seeing it in black and white, you know, just tells us how much we're struggling as Oregonians and how much our customers are struggling. And if we can't get people in housing, you know, that's such a basic need that we have to do better at meeting. So I know that our programs are going to help that and are helping that. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Anybody else on the council who would like to be heard right now? Okay, guess we're ready to continue moving along. Dr. Freeman?
Yes, we are ready, and Alicia Howell will be presenting information on our most recent down payment assistance award.
Good morning, Chair Hall, council members, and Deputy Director Gant. Alicia Howell, Program Analyst for the Homeownership Programs. I'd like to take a moment to special shout out to Councilmember Higginbotham. Thank you so much for everything. I loved working with you over the past 9 years, and it's been a great partnership, and I will definitely miss you and our fun little banters back and forth that we have occasionally when we're trying to get our work done. So anyway, I wish you the best in your retirement, and I'm so jealous. But anyway, enjoy, and thank you so much for your partnership. Much appreciated. I just want to share with you our down payment assistance awards that we recently, our down payment RFA, we just recently closed it. We have 21 applications that were submitted for, I think I went too far, sorry. Oh, no. We had 21 applications submitted for our down payment RFA, and we awarded all 21 applicants for down payment assistance. Some highlights of our program were for the very first time, we had some general funds in our RFA for culturally responsive organizations funding. We required organizations that were applying for these funds to be either a culturally specific organization or be a culturally responsive organization to receive this funding. I just want to share with you that we did reopen our RFA that closes on March 9th for the culturally responsive funding. We want to try and get as much of that $10 million out as possible. So we've reopened it for additional applications to fully commit the funding. The culturally responsive funds is going to be offered to home buyers as a grant, regardless of the amount that's offered to them. And to share with you, we're so excited. We have a first generation home buyer definition for home buyers as part of our program. And that was part of our changes that we made last year that you approved. So to share with you on the culturally responsive funding, we had 5 applicants that were certified as culturally specific and 5 applicants that are approved as culturally responsive. And they requested close to $5 million in this current 21 applicants. So for the first generation home buyer, I want to share with you the information of what is available for them. And it's for household income at or below 100% AMI. The maximum amount each home buyer can receive of each funding source is $60,000 or 20% of the purchase price, whichever is less. We do allow our funding to be combined. So the potential and based on the applicant's program, they can offer the client up to $120,000 if they do decide to combine the funding. So this would help with some of that burden that we're seeing with those housing prices. And all of the funding, other than the culturally responsive that's out there in this RFA, is at a 5-year forgivable loan after 5 years owner occupancy, and except for this culturally responsive funding. So there is an opportunity for immediate generational wealth for home buyers, first generation home buyers, especially with using our first generation home buyers. We just want to shout out because we know this is a huge, this is a huge deal for Oregon because we are the first to offer this funding, and the increased amount is going to be substantial for our home buyers. The list of awardees are in your packet, and I just wanted to show the map of the areas of the organizations that will be offering funding. We did receive participation to serve 34 counties. Unfortunately, we are missing 2, but For the most part, we are serving the entire state with our down payment assistance funding, including for the first time, we have funding going directly to the Umatilla tribe and into the reservation, the reservation. So that's the first time we have funding that's going directly, not just in the county, but within the Umatilla reservation. So this is just information. We're not asking for approval. We're just sharing the information for our awardees. And just, if anybody has any questions, we did have our packet with all the information and the awardees that were listed, including the amounts that were funded in the counties that they're planning on serving.
Councilmember Mena.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just want to commend you on the very great job. This is, I think, one of the areas where it's difficult to reach the equity component, and this is one of the ways to do that. And these organizations that have been selected, I think, are connected with the communities of color and communities that are been disadvantaged. And so we hope for a great outcome from this initiative. And again, job very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the council with some feedback? All right, Assistant Director Freeman, does that bring us to the close of your team's segment of the agenda?
It does, Chair Hall. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you all. And now we move on to housing stabilization and the Housing Stabilization Division Director, Jill Smith. Director Smith, are you and your team ready?
I believe we are. I see them on the screen.
Okay, take it away then.
Good afternoon, Chair Hall and council members. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm Jill Smith. I'm the Director of Housing Stabilization. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here with Dan Elliott, our Senior Energy Policy Analyst, and Joy Aldrich, who is our LIWA and SHOW Programs Analyst. We are here today both to give you an update on the LIWA program. LIWA, I'm still learning all of these acronyms, Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. We're giving you both an update and seeking a motion from the council approving proposed rule changes to modify operations of the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. If you remember, last April, the Energy Services team provided the council with our initial perspectives on this new program that we're rolling out. And we're back with you now following several months of implementation to give you kind of some information on what we've learned. And I'm thrilled to say that kind of the engine behind all of this work, Joy Aldrich, is here to talk about what we've learned from the people being served and rule changes we're recommending as a result of that. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Aldrich.
You're on mute, Joy.
Thank you. I forgot I had it muted on the second part. Good afternoon, Chair Hall, Executive Director Bell, and council members. My name is Joy Aldrich, and I operate the Low Income Household Water Assistance, or LIWA, and State Home Oil Weatherization, or SHOW programs for the Energy Services section. We are coming to you today with proposed rule changes for the LIWA program based on months of constant collaboration and engagement with the Community Action Agency network. Even with more than 10,000 households having received assistance, LIWA assistance since April, the network has discovered a lack of scalable or balanced distribution due to the diverse disconnection and moratorium policies of the water and sewer vendors. These proposed rule changes, which have been attached, for which we are requesting your approval, are direct reflections of our problem solving with the network. We do have federal approval to move forward once we receive local approval. With the council's approval, we would like to take immediate action to initiate these changes effective this coming Monday. We would be happy to answer any questions you may have, and we greatly appreciate your time and consideration.
Councilmember DeFontorum.
Thank you, Chair Hall. One question, I believe it was last year, tribes were, if they were a LIHEAP tribe that did a low-income household energy assistance program, we also received direct funding to do the water program. Is that part of the proposed rule?
So the tribes did receive direct funding directly from the Office of Community Services, which is part of US HHS. So this does not include tribal funding per se, but it does build in, and it is a continuation of a building in of allowing, if a tribal member either does not have funding available to them with their tribe or needs additional assistance, they are more than welcome to seek assistance from their local community action agency, just like anyone else.
Hey, anything else from the council? Well, are we ready to bring this to a vote? Oh, Councilmember Lee, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chair Hall. I was a little late on the hand raise. I'm interested in hearing, I know that the REIT is not fully implemented, and I'm interested to hear how racial justice and equity questions were approached or considered or thought of as we put these rule changes in place.
Thank you. As far as racial racial justice and equity with the LIWA program, part of the master grant agreement with the agencies for this program has been to include community organizations who are culturally responsive as part of their outreach. And that has been from the very beginning of the program. Once we started seeing the larger county programs stand up, Multnomah County, to be specific, is one of the very large counties who have a very deep embedded tie with their culturally responsive organizations. And we have seen some amazing work coming in from them, raising those numbers for the households who are not typically seen by community action agencies or seen by other programs. So we are seeing households as the memo has described, that we have we're trying to reach that equitable potential with the program. We are still learning, and we're still trying to venture out and see how we can improve, and this rule change will actually help to initiate that and further that. Some of the households, especially in the Portland metro area, have a very small bill, and so the single standard LIWA payment pays off enough on the bill, but does not leave them a foothold to be able to give them that stabilization. So this rulemaking will allow them to receive not only a second standard payment, but also initiate a stabilizing credit for all agencies if they choose to, that is based on their specific service area's need. So if the typical bill is only $50, they may choose, based on their need on their community, to say, we are going to apply a 3-month stabilizing credit. And we are leaving them up to the agencies to determine that based on their internal need.
Chair Hall, can I follow up on that?
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy, for that information. I have to say that none of that makes sense to me. If we're simply going to continue to, right? I appreciate that what this rule is doing is giving community action agencies further discretion to increase payments and make multiple payments, which I says, of course, say right on. I think we cannot look to what happens in Multnomah County to be the example or to carry the rest of the state in terms of culturally specific and culturally responsive programming, and continuing to do in terms of our distribution and allocation the same practices that we're doing now without reflecting on what some of the really good data you've been pulling and tracking, over this last period of time leads us to think about doing something differently. We're not reaping the benefits of the efforts that you all are making to collect that data and to describe that data or share that data with us. So I get that this is an administrative role. I get that we are doing what is a good thing, which is giving more discretion to community action agencies and allowing them to make different decisions about the person in front of them. And we all know that the community action agencies in and of themselves are not necessarily the trusted locations where communities of color will go first. They might go last when they're desperate, but they won't necessarily go first. So this again is not about, up the role, down the role. I'm happy to support the administrative role, but I'm inspired by the presentation we heard this morning to continue to ask ourselves these kinds of questions. And I don't expect a response, because I think there isn't one at this moment. What I'm trying to say is, let's start practice right now. Read is done. You all have put it together. Let's start asking the questions right now as it pertains to everything. So thanks, Joy. I appreciate your response.
Councilmember DeFontorum.
Thank you, Chair Hall, and thank you, Joy, for your response. So I'm just going to say, I don't need an answer right now, to quote Mary Lee, but something I would like to know in the future is, out of all the funding that is being put out there for water assistance, how much of that is being utilized on reservation? Most of the assistance, if not all of the assistance we provided through the other funding source for the same program was to on-reservation housing where people have their own water bill. Wasn't exclusively that, but I would be interested in knowing that. And I don't know if we're collecting, demographic information, or if the people who are receiving the money through community action agency, if that's information they're collecting. I'm sure they're doing a fine job, and I don't want to suggest otherwise. It's just different when you live on the reservation. We are where people go to receive funding for energy assistance, and not just on the reservation. Tribal people in general go to their tribe for assistance. So I hope that, I'm not going to object to the administrative rule, I support it, but I do hope that we're collecting information that will inform our decision-making in another way, because the playing field needs to change. If we're truly going to be about equity and racial justice, we have to really, change what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I appreciate everything you're doing, and I thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to leave it there.
All right, anybody else from the council who would like to be heard at this time? Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. My understanding is that there is some universal access granted in this new change, and not two separate applications. So we're able to use LIHEAP and LIHEAP eligibility. So we're not running people through the exact same process. My understanding is that there's maybe just one form that they need to certify. Is that correct? Can somebody answer that for me?
So we are using express enrollment for households who have been seen by the Community Action Agency for LIHEAP in the same program year. So it's just signing a LIWA disclaimer in addition to what they've already completed through LIHEAP.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Hey. Mr. Elliott.
Hey, I thought I'd lean in and just qualify. Thank you for the comments, Mary. And yeah, as far as the demographic information that we have, the good news is, yes, we have collected the demographic information. The tough news is that we have 5 months to complete this project, and we're making a pivot, as you can tell, with the program piece based on the arrearage data information that we have, and the fact that the program as designed with the feds and what they've placed upon us as far as sideboards, which has been not an easy program to administer in that regard, hasn't allowed us to get a scalable response. And so it's good. We've got the data that we'll be able to have respond to that. The other aspect of this is that it's exposed the need, which we'll have bigger discussions on, because we're trying to provide this data to the federal to Congress, to feds, to expand and extend a program like this. Unfortunately, they didn't get it into any of the current, so it will be ending in September. It doesn't mean that the fight doesn't go on in regards to recognizing the need that this is in households. And it's exposed that. Now, what we'll take with the data that we're collecting and that we have is to show with clarity as to what the responsiveness was and what kind of outreach and had with the demographic information we have, among all the other litany of information and data that we're collecting as well for this program. So we'll have a good story to tell. The other aspect of this is there's a new bill, a state bill, House Bill 3125, that's trying to move forward in legislature to establish a water assistance program administered by this department, by which we're watching closely. Stakeholders are encouraged by our performance with the federal program. But what's beautiful about this particular program and the offering is it will not be mirroring the federal aspects. So we'll be able to take the data that we've learned in the short time to administer and pivot to this program and hopefully do something better in the future that helps us focus more effectively on the BIPOC communities as well. And so as far as the data, we have the data, and we're happy to provide that to the council specifically, particularly on the Native American elements as well.
Jill Smith.
Thank you, Chair Hall. I just wanted to weigh in and say that this program has been an opportunity to really learn. And one thing we learned was there's tremendous need. I mean, if you look at the current program expenditures in Joy's report, 10,561 unique households received water assistance, and 55% of those were renters. I remember years ago being on a committee in Portland when they were trying to figure out if renters needed water assistance and how to go about providing that. So we're making progress, but I also wanted to point out 40% of those households are BIPOC communities. So that's another huge indicator of need. And we can do better, and fingers crossed we have the opportunity to do so with state funding. And thank you for pushing us, all of you, to use the REIT. We are anxious and eager to do so. We've been eagerly waiting for it to be, rolled out so that we can make it part of our regular practices. Thank you.
Okay, so are we at a decision point here now? And would somebody like to make an approval for adoption of these proposed administrative rules?
So moved.
Thanks, Barb. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor. And if we could have a roll call vote now, please.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFantorum. Can you repeat that one more time? I did not hear that.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Farrell.
Sorry, my mute was off. Yes.
Thank you. Chair Hall.
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham.
Yes.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes.
Councilmember Mena.
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, thanks to everybody. On to disaster recovery and resilience, and Assistant Director Ryan Flynn. Are you ready?
Chair Hall, can I jump in and tee this
Oh,
one
of course.
really quickly?
course.
For the record, Caleb Yant, Deputy Director of the agency. We have Chelsea Caddo with us to present this topic. I just wanted to give a little bit of context around both this item as well as kind of this topic generally. Council members will probably remember a few months ago, maybe more than a few months, I hate to admit, I discussed with the council work that we were doing with the Department of Justice around Housing Stability Council authorities, right? What comes in front of the council, what statutorily is required for a vote, what statutorily is required to get advice. And I kind of laid out our intent to work with DOJ to get a kind of authoritative four-corner document on this, and then engage with a subgroup of the Housing Stability Council to kind of work towards, okay, this is what it says. What do we think it should be? Where are, let's just see where we're aligned, and then come back as a full Housing Stability Council to kind of work towards agreement on what changes are needed. I give that context for a couple of reasons. One, just, as far as process-wise, there's been significant changes at the Department of Justice, including the team and leadership of the team that we're working with, and that foundational document hasn't yet been completed with us together with the Department of Justice. And I say that because, one, I just want to remind us of that. That's something that we want to do, that we need to be accountable to you all for doing and engaging with. And two, because you're about to hear adoption of a temporary rule, something that historically wouldn't have come to Housing Stability Council, related to what Chelsea will be walking through. You've seen this project, Mosaic project, 2 times before in the last about year and a half. Like many things within disaster recovery and resiliency, the project has changed, the work has been a bit iterative. And in this case, there's minor changes to the financial structures. The temporary rule is specific to this Mosaic project, are coming before you today, not because of changes to the project, but because the prior rules related action, which we had operated, was under the authority of the OHCS director, has expired. And now our legal counsel is saying that in order for us to do the same thing, Housing Stability Council needs to take action on it. So I give that framing, just one, to kind of re-elevate the work that we intend to do, and that it hasn't just fallen off the radar, and also just to give a bit of context before Chelsea jumps into this.
Thank you, Deputy Director Yant. Good afternoon, Chair Hall and council members. For the record, my name is Chelsea Caddo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Chief Policy Officer for Disaster Recovery and Resilience. Today, we're asking for council approval of temporary administrative rules for disaster recovery and resilience to address the updated terms, in particular, the maximum income limits at the Mosaic property, which is now being funded under disaster recovery and resilience rather than affordable rental housing, where it started out. As Deputy Director Yant stated, the updated terms of the Mosaic project were approved by Housing Stability Council on December 2nd, 2022. And DOJ had advised us to set temporary rules rather than rely on the previous waiver, in order to make sure everything was in place for execution of the loan agreement and to align with those updated terms that Housing Council had approved. So I am happy to give more background. I know you've seen this project a number of times. This is really just request for approval of the temporary rules specific to DRR and specific to this project, but happy to answer questions or give any additional details.
Council, questions? Discussion? Any feedback? Then I would like to entertain a motion for approval of the proposed temporary rule. Anyone, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Higginbotham, and a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. And now if we could have the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Councilmember DeFantorum,
Yes.
Councilmember Farrell,
Yes.
Chair Hall,
Yes.
Councilmember Higginbotham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Mena,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, great. And we are up to
Chair
Central.
Hall, just a quick
Yes.
question.
Oh, of course.
Do we have any idea in terms of timeline when we would be able to get some of that information that work that we had talked about before?
Councilmember Mena, let me make sure that we bring this up in the director report in next meeting. I haven't got a firm timeline, and rather than give something that is ill-informed, I'll make sure we are able to loop back at the beginning of the next meeting, if that works for you.
All right, now the presentation from the Central Services Division.
Good afternoon, Chair Hall and council members. My name is Laura De Leon. I'm the HR director here at Oregon Housing and Community Services. I have Christopher Henderson that is joining me this afternoon to present follow-up data from our last visit. And so we have a presentation and Christopher will be walking us through that. And then if you have any questions, we can answer those throughout that presentation. But we are here as a follow-up and we're happy to be here. So thank you for having us and happy Friday. So I will, yeah, I'll go off of mute. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Hall and council members. For the record, my name is Christopher Henderson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the HRIS administrator and HR operations analyst here at Oregon Housing and Community Services. Like Laura said, we have a report on our staffing demographics. So let me get my screen share up and running here. And I want to ensure that everyone can see the presentation okay. Perfect. All right. So we just have a few topics that we're going to give a briefing on today as a follow-up from our last presentation. We are going to take a look at our current demographics within our workforce. And then we're also going to look at a couple of staffing trends, particularly around candidate pools. At our last presentation, there was a request to be able to get a little bit better of idea of the demographic makeup of the folks applying for the jobs that we are posting. So we'll start by talking about our current workforce demographics, particular to race and ethnicity. So similar to our last presentation, not much has really changed in these past few months. Our staff representation continues to exceed 2020 census data for all non-white federal race ethnicity categories, but still with the exception of those who identify as Hispanic or Latino. As of March 1st, our current makeup of the agency is 10.81% of an expected 13.4%. We of course recognize we would never get perfect representation, but this does continue to be a particular category where we still are underrepresented. In terms of thinking of our job classification categories, which include officials and administrators, professionals, and administrative support, we have fairly consistent representation across those. They tend to mirror the overall makeup of the agency, though our administrative support job category has the greatest diversity in terms of percentage. One of the reasons for that is because it happens to be the job category where we have the least number of positions. So as we're able to just get even a couple of folks of different identifying groups in there, we would see or we would expect to see higher levels of representation. So just to give you some visuals as to what this looks like, apologies, this is a lot of data on one chart, but you can see where we've been at for the last, for this entire biennium, from July 1st of 2021 through March 1st. We've had fair consistency for a good portion of the biennium across all of our race and ethnicity categories, with a few fluctuations here or there. Our Hispanic and Latino group continues to be the demographic that has experienced the greatest percentage of growth. Though over the past couple of months, it's just sort of been doing an up and down fluctuation, very minor. And then when we look at our job classification categories by race ethnicity, this is of March 1st. So you can see where that administrative support through technical makeup has greater levels of diversity than these other categories. But in terms of looking at officials and administrators and professionals, this is relatively consistent with what we have throughout the rest of the agency. Not perfect, but fairly close. And just to clarify, that officials and administrators category represents anyone who is a supervisory manager. And so one of the things that we wanted to add this time around, just because it came up in conversation, was in thinking in terms of gender. What are our current demographics in terms of gender? In looking at these numbers, staff representation consistently favors those employees who identify as female. This is pretty standard in state government. So those who identify as female, our percentage over this biennium has ranged anywhere from 61 to 64%, where male ranges from 36 to 39%. And then in looking at those job classification categories, again, it's relatively consistent between categories of officials and administrators and professionals, though the administrative support category has an even higher female majority, averaging 82% over this biennium. So again, just for a visual representation of that, you can see there's very, very little fluctuation here in terms of this makeup. And in looking at the job classification, we can see that representation there, with that highest range being in administrative support. So that's all of the data that we have on our current workforce for this presentation. So I'll transition us into talking about our candidate pools. So we went back and did, just a data pool, again, going back to the beginning of this biennium, and a couple of things that I want to set the framework for here is this goes from July 1st of 2021 through December of 2022. The reason being is because the reports that we have access to look at actual job requisitions that are open within particular months. So I'm intentionally lagging this report because for any requisition, let's say that was opened at the end of December, because that may have still been in progress even at the end of January or mid-February, we want to make sure that we're getting as accurate data as possible whenever we're looking at some of this information. So in terms of looking, again, starting with race and ethnicity, candidates identifying as 2 or more races is the only category that has overall steady growth from the start of this biennium. Overall, there have been no otherwise easily identifiable trends or major trends during this time, but there are a couple of points of interest, not necessarily trends, but just some things that we found interesting. The first being that Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander and American Indian or Alaskan Native groups represented the lowest percentage of our candidate pool. In fact, there were multiple months over the 18 months that we calculated where we did not have folks of these racial and ethnic groups applying for our jobs at all. Race ethnicity is not required to be provided by candidates whenever they apply for a job. It is optional. And so we did see a fair number of folks who selected either not wishing to identify or simply not providing an answer to that question. In that case, just for sake of analysis, we converted those blank fields to I do not wish to answer so that we could just get a better idea there. But in the first few months of the biennium, the percentage of folks who were selecting or not providing an answer to this question tended to float around 10% that we have seen in recent months. There's been an overall reduction in this percentage down to about 5%. And then job categories for officials and administrators and administrative support have the least diverse candidate pools overall. And then we're continuing to do additional analysis as capacity permits. There's a lot of data that we actually have access to. So we're really hoping to be able to expand out some of our own dashboards to be able to take a look at things like stages that candidates are making it to, where folks are dropping off, where we have self-withdrawals, those sorts of things. And just for a visual representation, this is going to be for our overall candidate pool, month by month, like I say, from July 1st of 2021 through December 1st of 2022. You can see that there's quite a bit of fluctuation as we go through month to month. So it was difficult to identify any sort of specific trends here. And then just to make sure that we're also talking about gender in terms of our candidate pool. No surprise here, really, I think with the makeup of our workforce, that candidates who self-identified as females almost always represent the majority of the applicant pool. Again, much like race and ethnicity, gender is not required to be provided by a candidate whenever they apply for a job. It is only required if they are made a formal offer for employment. In this case, if anyone chose not to provide an answer because there's not an option that says I do not wish to answer, we just converted that to not provided, again, for sake of analysis. And this group tends to represent anywhere from 7 to 10% of the overall candidate. And just again, as another note, the gender field is currently restricted to male or female based on federal reporting requirements, though gender identity is an optional component that employees can choose to provide, but it is not an available feature for candidates. So that is one area that we aren't able to really take a look at there. And again, just for visual representation, you can see what the makeup looks like during these past few months. And with that, that is all that we have for you in this presentation. So I will go ahead and turn it back over.
All right. Questions, comments, council feedback on the presentation? Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Chair Hall. Laura and Chris, thanks so much for sharing this information. And I want to just in a larger context, point out that this is a nice example of the council asking for additional information in a conversation and the subject matter at a council meeting, and then staff being able to come back and share and respond and reply to that. So I just want to appreciate that. It's not always easy to be tracking and then responding and then coming back. And I appreciate the diligence that you all showed with us here. I have a couple of questions that, again, don't need an answer today. I'm curious about a lot of the data points, Christopher, that you shared that said, you know, we don't ask or we can't ask. A lot of conversation has gone into the Real D data policy. And I know that that conversation has been focused on people who are customers of our organizations. However, I also know people have been talking about how do we mirror the Real D data collection for our internal work and for our HR work. And that seems to be an enormous area that's needing us to dive in there quickly, because being able to for people to identify and have that data is super important, whether it's at the candidate level or whether it's at the hiring level or the employment level. We need to have that information, and it's established state policy. So it should be possible for us to look at that and try to include some of that as established state policy. The other thing I wanted to just raise up is, Christopher, you talked about being able to look at the different, sort of the life cycle of a recruitment, up from recruitment to hiring. I think that's critical. I think we have to understand where we have adverse impact potentially happening, right? If we have a pool that's 50% people of color and we get down to a final candidate pool of, 8 or whatever, and there's no people of color, there's something happening in that cycle. And we need to understand that because we need to understand the adverse impact. I think I've talked about this before, but the NFL at one point instituted what they call the Rooney Rule, which said you don't have any candidate pool for the head coach without ensuring that there was representation of, in this situation, Black candidates. Now, that's not tokenism. That's not, oh, I just have somebody in here because they're Black. That's this person is as qualified and experienced and as ready to take on this challenge. And we won't go forward unless that candidate pool, that final candidate pool, is diverse and isn't all white. We've got some opportunities now. We've got the head of home ownership division. We've got some opportunities, especially at the executive leadership level. I'm very concerned about that, where we need to perhaps be setting some internal goals or internal practices for ourselves. And again, I want to be crystal clear. I'm not speaking to tokenism. I am speaking to ensuring that we do the hard work to ensure that our final pools are diverse enough that we have a choice and an option. I get it. Once a hiring manager gets a slate of candidates that are all white, the process has already happened. And now you're choosing amongst from what you have. I want us to question, you're gonna regret, I think, Caleb and friends having put that REIT together and presented it to us today, because REIT is gonna call us out for asking ourselves why did we get an all white final candidate poll? What's happening here? Because at that point, it's too late for us to make any change. I want to question that we've sent our sites as, our measurement as the census. I think we all know the challenges with the census in terms of the tool accurate reporting on and quantifying the numbers of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and other identities in our community. And I think there are other litmus tests or standards we should be holding ourselves to. For instance, what about the 40% of the people who are utilizing water assistance, water bill payment assistance, right? What about our service users? What about our customers? What about our partners in specific areas where we know there's a need for service and we're trying to get the service? What if some of those were our standards rather than our census? Because what I see happening, and again, there's no blame or shame here, we're sort of on a level, we're sort of at a stasis. It's not a level playing field. It's a stasis based on our comparison to the census. And we're looking pretty good in our comparison to the census. That's not my goal. My goal is not parity with the census. My goal is that we have enough people with lived experience in the very identities and issues that we say we're lifting up with REIT and everything else reflective in the workforce. And in order to do that, we're going to have to change our practices. And we're going to have to change our policies, and we're going to have to push different things. It's very, I think, similar to the discussion we just had about the feds and the water assistance program, right? They're not going to change, so we have to change, and we have to push hard to change. And hopefully the REIT and the internal modeling group is a resource for all of these discussions. If we have, another $1 billion of public resources coming into this organization, and it is not reflected not only in the programming, but who we're hiring to run these programs, we will have failed. We will have failed. I'm always disappointed where we say, well, we can't make any change till we get the new dollar, but I understand it. I'm a bureaucrat. We're having the new dollar. The new dollar has got to change who gets into this organization, how we retain them. And that, again, there's urgency there for me in terms of how we go. And we could only have this discussion because you all brought the data. So thank you.
Great. Anybody else on the council who would like to weigh in now? Okay, thanks for this very important information. And I'm sure we'll be revisiting this question often. Right, this brings us now to the close of our scheduled agenda. Deputy Director Yant, any final words of wisdom?
Certainly not words of wisdom, just appreciation. Council Member Lee, we will not regret the REIT, it is absolutely the way that we make sure that we're asking the questions, and I just appreciate the work that you all do to help hold us accountable to the values that we talk about.
Indeed. Well, so Barb, the time has come to say goodbye, or so long, but not farewell. Happy trails. I think everybody has richly enjoyed serving with you, and here's our final toast for a very pleasant and very long retirement.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So now until April, I'm going to adjourn the Housing Stability Council, and we'll see you then.